Good morning again. Everyone who had arrived by 9 o'clock is now here, so will Westport's annual town meeting please come to order? And would all please rise and join me in saluting the flag. I pledge allegiance Thank you. Here's what we're here to do this morning. We're going to go through a few preliminaries. The Finance Committee is going to give us a presentation on the town's financial condition. We will begin the annual town meeting. We have the somewhat awkward but necessary step of having a special town meeting embedded in the middle of the annual town meeting. So as soon as whatever matter of business we're on at 10 o'clock, by the time we complete that, we will recess the annual town meeting. We will convene and complete the special town meeting. We will dissolve the special town meeting. We will then resume and complete the annual town meeting and then dissolve it when it is finished. I'll guide you through the steps, so I trust it will not be too confusing. So, what are we doing here? We are the town's legislature. You are our senators and congressmen, and we're here to act on the articles in the town meeting warrant. My name's Stephen Forrest. I'm the town moderator. I chair the meeting and I decide questions of order. I want to take a few minutes to explain how the meeting works. Town meeting is a gathering of the willing registered voters of the towns as a legislature to decide on the matters set out in the warrant. The warrant is a list prepared by the Board of Selectmen of the matters that we will act on in this meeting. We will act on every item in the warrant. We will not act on anything that is not in the warrant. The individual agenda items are called warrant articles. A warrant article poses a question to the town, a question that may be answered, in some cases, many different ways. We then ask for a motion, most of which are prepared in advance because a lot of them have to be in proper legalese. You will see them on a slide, and you will see them, and you can see them printed in your warrant. The motion proposes a specific answer to the question. We then follow the tradition of asking for a second so that we know at least two people in the room are in favor of it. We then get a recommendation from the Finance Committee, and that is followed by discussion, which you are all invited to participate in. We'll talk about rules for that in a minute. And then at the end of that, we vote. Although one of the things that may happen during discussion is, as I said, the motion proposes a specific answer to the question proposed by the warrant article. If you would like to answer that question in a little bit different way, you can approach a microphone and propose an amendment, and we can change the way we're trying to answer that question. But in the end, we come to the question, to the answer that we want to vote on. We take a vote, and we then move on. We declare whether it passed or failed, then we move on. We operate under a set of rules that will be enforced, I hope politely, but firmly. The purpose of our rules is to allow us to complete our business in an efficient, orderly way, identifying and acting on the will of the majority while respecting the minority, and always showing appropriate respect for our neighbors. And while the rules are many, they can be summed up in four concepts. We are polite, we deal with one thing at a time, no one gets an unfair advantage, and it's a beautiful day outside, so we move it along as quickly as we can without sacrificing 1 through 3. Our rules come from 4 sources. Our town bylaws, which have a few rules about town meeting, a fascinating book called Town Meeting Time that you should all read, that goes into all the arcana of the rules of town meeting. We also have traditions that we adhere to because it's simply the way we've always done it, and then the moderator's judgment. If you would like to participate in discussion, please wait to be recognized or given the floor by me. Please begin by stating your name, and then please speak only to the motion before the meeting at the moment. We also ask that you do not engage in any personal speech. So we don't say, when Bob said such and such, that the artful town meeting speaker says, when the previous speaker said such and such. So we will ask you not to refer to others by name. Certainly, rude and disrespectful speech cannot be tolerated, and while everyone can speak on any question as many times as they like, no one gets to speak for a second time until everybody who wants their first chance has had it. We limit speech to 5 minutes, which, if you are new, you will quickly discover is probably too long. By the 5th minute, no one remembers what you said in the first 2. The best town meeting speech gets up, people say what they're going to say, then they say it, and then they say what they just said in about 90 seconds, and those are the ones that have the greatest impact. We do allow some 10-minute, up to 10-minute presentations that are supported by PowerPoint presentations and are arranged in advance. If you do want to speak, you would come to one of these microphones, and I ask that because different people have different levels of COVID concern, that you please space yourselves by 6 feet as you wait to speak at the microphone. We talked before about amendments and the fact that the answer to the question posed by the article that is made initially as that main motion may not be the way you want to answer it. If that's the case, as I said, you can step to a microphone and propose an amendment. If the amendment is simple, changing a couple of words, a number, something we can all easily understand, fine. If it's more complex than that, I need you to write it down on paper, bring it up here, psst, and hand it to me. As we work our way through all these things and you try to make a wise decision on them, you may find yourself in need of some information that you don't have, and you may want to ask a question of someone. And you're encouraged to do that. But we have kind of an awkward but necessary procedure for doing that. If you wanted to ask a question, for example, of town council, you would not speak directly to Mr. Jenkins. You would stand and say, Mr. Moderator, through you, I have a question for town council. To which I would reply, what is your question? You would then ask your question. Then I would turn to town council and say, Mr. Jenkins, would you be kind enough to answer that question? He will say, Mr. Moderator, through you, he will answer the question, and then I will make sure that that answer was satisfactory to whoever asked. What that does is it avoids the back and forth that, from experience, we know can quickly degenerate. I would also ask that questions be for information purposes only. A question like, why would you think anything that stupid would be a good idea, is not a question for information. That's trying to make a point. So we ask you to try not make a point with your question, but ask for information. And those who answer questions, we have speaking limits. We have 5-minute time limits. If you take your opportunity to answer a question, being nice enough to answer a question, but you then editorialize for 10 minutes, it becomes unfair. You've gotten an extra 10 minutes that others didn't get. So I would ask those who answer questions to answer just the question as quickly and briefly as you can. A lot of times, yes or no is good. Before we go any further, I have to ask that the folks in this back right section, that section was reserved for those who have exceptional needs for spacing because of their medical conditions. And so we ask that people sit either in one of the seats marked with a yellow X, and if someone else is with you, they can sit right next to you. But if you do not have exceptional needs for spacing, I would ask you to please move to one of the other seats. All of these are alternate rows blocked off with suggested 2 seats between parties. The center is open seating. Thank you very much. I appreciate your cooperation with that. There are 2 situations in which you can stand up and interrupt somebody. The first is a point of order, and that would be if you think I'm making a mistake in the way that I'm conducting the meeting. That has happened in the past, and it will absolutely happen again in the future, and I would be grateful to you if you stand up and say, Mr. Moderator, I rise to a point of order, and tell me what I'm doing wrong. We will then either correct the proceedings accordingly, or if I disagree with your point of order, we'll continue the way we were. The second is a point of privilege, and that refers to anything that interferes with your ability to participate effectively in the meeting. If people around you are talking and you can't hear, I apologize for the hum of the air purifiers, but they are all for our benefit, and there's nothing we can do about that. But if anything is interfering with your ability to participate in the meeting, please stand up and say, Mr. Moderator, I rise to a point of privilege. So, we're now going to move on to the Finance Committee presentation, but before we do that, I would like to ask you to join me in giving a big round of applause to our Chairman, Gary Carrero, Karen Rouse, Buzzy Barron, Tom Schmidt, Hugh Morton, Bob McCarthy, Cynthia Brown, Tracy Priestner, and Kevin Rio, who are your Finance Committee, who work a long time and very hard to analyze these issues in a depth that just is not practical for the rest of us, and we owe them all a debt of gratitude. And with that, I will turn it over to Gary Carrero.
morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Finance Committee, I would like to welcome everyone to Westport's annual town meeting. Mr. Moderator, it's my honor this morning to present to the residents of Westport the FY22 operating budget highlights and concerns. I'd like to focus everyone's attention to the handout titled Annual Town Meeting, June 5th, 2021, Message from the Finance Committee. Westport's chronic structural deficit. Expenses outpacing revenues is a structural deficit, and Westport has been in this chronic situation for many years. Each year it becomes more difficult to find ways to patch up the holes. For many years we have adopted short-term solutions which simply kick the can down the road. Revenues. Westport's revenue growth is limited by Proposition 2.5, historical state aid reductions that have not been restored, slower growth of local tax and fee receipts, few new sustainable and diverse revenue sources. The biggest factor constraining revenue growth in Prop 2.5, Westport relies on property taxes that result to 73% of its overall revenue, and growth is limited by the tax levy. Expenses. Westport faces growing demands to increase expenditures in all its municipal services, as well as to comply with additional required state mandates. Each year, making the budget balance means these needed funds are excluded from the budget and not appropriated. Virtually every department in all of Westport sectors of its general government, public safety, schools, public works and facilities, human resources, culture, and recreation are lacking the resources to adequately provide needed services to our town residents. There are no sufficient revenues to support these needed expenditures. Many departments have needed positions that are unfilled. Many departments are understaffed. Many departments wait each year for help, and each year the requests remain unfunded. Chronic deficit. As we look ahead, the fiscal outlook does not improve. In fact, the structural deficit grows each year. Revenue growth continues to be limited, and expense increases are dictated by growth and other mandates that outpace available funds. The budget presented to you today has many difficult choices. Current recurring revenue sources are not sufficient to sustain and support all legitimate department needs. Again, many budget requests have been eliminated from the Finance Committee recommended budget in order to maintain a balanced budget. The FY22 budget. The FY22 budget process started back in October when departments prepared their budgets for the following fiscal year. Department heads participated in budget hearings with both the Select Board and Finance Committee and from December through April. The 9-member Finance Committee holds multiple public meetings and encourages anyone to attend our meetings. The full FY22 budget is included in warrant article number 5. Recommendations for free cash. Free cash is an unappropriated fund balance and is certified by the Department of Revenue once the financial books are closed for the fiscal year. The free cash calculation incorporates surplus revenues, revenue collection in excess of estimated revenues, budget turnbacks, unexpected appropriations, the prior year's free cash balance, and outstanding property taxes. Free cash is the amount of funds that are unrestricted and available for appropriation. Free cash is a non-recurring revenue source and should be limited to paying one-time expenditures, funding capital projects, or replenishing other reserves. There is no guarantee the amount of free cash that will be available each year, and it is unpredictable. Recurring revenues should only be funded by recurring, reliable revenue sources. The Department of Revenue recommends avoiding supplementing current year departmental operations with free cash. The Finance Committee has worked hard to avoid using free cash to temporarily patch holes. That is true of the budget we present to you today, which is supported as well by the Select Board. In doing that, we want to note the extraordinary cooperation and restraint that has characterized the town department's behavior in helping us pull this together. Ongoing expenses are best supported by ongoing recurring revenue sources. Difficult decisions ahead. The Finance Committee is in support of Proposition 2.5 override, which will provide Westport its needed recurring revenue stream and the ability to fund the many departments' needs. We are committed to working with the Select Board, the School Committee, and all other department heads to address the collective needs of the entire town of Westport. An override budget would require appropriation at a future town meeting and would be expressly contingent upon approval by the voters of a Proposition 2.5 override question at an election. The Finance Committee believes that this is the best option for the town of Westport, and pursuing this is an alternative solution for the voters to consider. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I ask again that this back right section is just for people who need more spacing than the average person because of their medical condition? So masks are required there. And if you don't have that need, I would ask you to please move to one of the other sections if you'd be kind enough. Thank you. And one other thing before we dive into the warrant. This is the last town meeting that our town administrator, Tim King, will be sitting up there looking so sharp. And if anybody deserves a round of applause here, it's Tim for the grace and professionalism that he has brought to his role for the last 10 years. He's leaving us, and we owe him a big thanks.
It's been an honor and a privilege to serve the people of the town of Westport these 7 years. I've truly enjoyed it and have worked with many wonderful people. Thank you.
Thank you. So, we're going to go through a couple of procedural motions just to flex our voting muscles here. I'm going to ask someone to make a motion that this meeting dispense with the reading of the warrant and of the constable's return of service of that warrant, and that the moderator not be required to read warrant articles verbatim, but may refer to them by number and subject matter. Someone saying so moved would do.
So moved.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried. That's how we do it. The next one, we're going to face several votes tonight that require a 2/3 majority. This is so that I don't have to count. If it's obviously a 2/3 majority, that I can declare it as such without having to count to determine by number whether it's a 2/3 majority. So I'm going to ask for a motion that if a 2/3 vote is required by statute, the moderator be authorized to declare a 2/3 vote in the same manner as the majority vote is declared, provided, however, that if a vote so declared is immediately questioned by 7 or more voters, the moderator shall verify it by taking a count. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried. Thank you. So, Article 1, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and/or transfer from available funds such sums of money necessary for the purpose of paying outstanding bills from prior fiscal years and/or taking their action relative thereto, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Carrero, may I have a motion, please?
Mr.
Yeah, there you go. I think you're on now.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town appropriate from free cash.
Can you hear him? Yeah, can you get a little closer to the mic?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town appropriate from free cash the sum of $664.05 to pay the outstanding bills from prior fiscal years listed in the warrant under Article 1.
Thank you. May I have a motion and a second? What is the Finance Committee recommendation, please?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 1 unanimously.
So this is the first of several articles we're going to encounter that have several line items to them. So we've got a procedure for doing that. I'm going to read the line items one by one. If you agree with that, you would vote yes, remain silent. If you disagree with that, you would vote no on that. You have a question about it, you would like to discuss it, say hold, and I will note the holds. When we get to the end of the list, we'll vote on all the items that had no hold, which we assume we are unanimously in favor of. Then we'll return to the items with a hold and deal with them one by one. So, Goodyear Auto Service Center, $652. WB Mason, $12.05. So, seeing no discussion on any of those, all those in favor of the motion under Article 1 will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 2, to see if the town will vote to amend the vote taken under Article 4 of the 2020 annual town meeting by transferring from available sums and/or various line items within the current appropriations such sums of money necessary to supplement the budgets of various departments for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020, and/or taking their action relative thereto, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Carrero, will you offer some motion?
Mr. Moderator, I move the town amend the vote taken under Article 4 of the 2020 annual town meeting by making the transfers between line items of the FY21 budget listed in the warrant under Article 2.
We have a second. Finance Committee recommendation, please.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 2 unanimously.
So, once again, we have a multi-line item article. So I will again read each line item. If you agree, remain silent. If you would like to discuss it, please say hold loud enough for me to hear you. From health insurance to town accountant wages and salaries, $4,500. From health insurance to treasurer wages and salaries, $6,000. From health insurance to legal services, $45,000. From health insurance to town annex wages and salaries, $1,000. From health insurance to snow and ice account, $15,000. From unemployment to reserve fund for unpaid leaves, $125,000. Hearing no discussion on any of those items, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 3, to see if the town will vote pursuant to the provisions of the General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 1B, to combine the offices of town treasurer and tax collector and town collector of taxes into one position, and further, to have such office become an appointed position, and further, to authorize the Board of Selectmen to provide for the appointment of such office for a term not to exceed 3 years, unless otherwise provided by law, and or taken their action relative thereto, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. And will the Board of Selectmen offer some motion, please?
I move the town adopt the provisions of Article 3 as printed in the warrant.
We have a motion and a second. May I have the Finance Committee recommendation, please?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 3 unanimously.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion under Article 3 will please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is carried. I'm sorry, those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 4, to see if the town will vote to fix the salary and compensation of all elected town officers for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2021, and/or take under action relative thereto, sponsored by the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Carrero, will you give us a motion, please?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town fix the salaries of the elected town officials for FY22 as follows. Moderator, $881. Selectman Chair, $6,986. Board members, 4. $27,477. Assessors, board members, 3. $19,144. Board of Health, members, 3. $9,963. Town clerk, $71,766.
May I ask if board members, Selectmen board members, was supposed to be 27,477? Or 74?
27,474.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Yes? Okay. Thank you. So it was pointed out that those are not the numbers that are printed in your warrant. I'm sorry, I thought those were. Oh, they are.
The motion is different than the article.
Okay. So, as I explained earlier, a warrant article asks a question. When the warrant was first put together, the answer to that question that the powers that be suggested was the one that you see printed immediately under the warrant article. It was subsequently decided to move different amounts, and so those are in the motion. So we're proposing a slightly different answer to the question than the one that was originally printed in the warrant. So the numbers that we are dealing with here are these right here. And I can't recall if I got a second to that or not. Can I get a second? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. May I have the Finance Committee recommendation, please?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 4 unanimously.
Thank you. So once again, multiple line item article. Please remain silent if you agree. Say hold if you would like to discuss. Moderator, 881. Selectman Chairman, 6986. Selectman Board Members, 4, 27,474. Assessors, Board Members, 3, 19,144. Board of Health Members, 3, 9,963. Town Clerk, 71,766. So hearing none, all those in favor of the motion under Article 4 will please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 5, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and/or transfer from available funds such sums of money considered necessary to defray the town's expenses for a 12-month period beginning July 1st, 2021, and appropriate the same to several departments and/or take under their action relative thereto, sponsored by the Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen. Mr. Carrero, may I have a motion?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the amounts of money set forth in the printed report of the Finance Committee be appropriated for several purposes, therein itemized, each item being considered a separate appropriation, and that the same be expended only for such purposes, and that these appropriations be funded as follows: $45,197,612, taxation, raise and appropriate; $15,888, waterways funds; $39,277, septic program, monies reserved for debt payments; $60,720, enterprise indirect cost transfer; $40,000, wetland funds; $40,000, cemetery sale of lots account; $40,000, cemetery perpetual care interest account; $40,000, transfer station receipts reserved; $13,000, community TV reserve; $107,935, free cash.
Is there a second? A motion, a second. Finance Committee recommendation, please.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action under Article 5 unanimously.
Thank you. So now, we're going to run through all the line items of the budget one by one. Town meeting is empowered to, for almost all departments, appropriate an amount for salaries and an amount for expenses. I'm only going to read the total. So if you would disagree or want to modify either of those other line items, please say hold when I read the total. The school committee, the schools is different in that we only vote the total, not the salary and expense. So, moderator, 881.
Oh, Steve, you're on Article 5.
Pardon?
Article 5. You're on 4. Article 5.
Oh,
We already
sorry.
did.
I'm sorry, what is the concern? Okay, that is the motion. That is the motion. I do not have the budget on a slide. You can see that in your warrant. So I'm going to ask you to follow along in your warrant. Okay, page 31 toward the back of the warrant. Thank you very much for that. Okay, I'm going to wait till I see pages stop turning. All right, looks like most of us are there. So, moderator, 881. Selectmen, 373,014. Finance committee, 4,288. Reserve fund, 50,000. Town accountant, 187,717. 187,717. Assessors, 242,291. Treasurer, 177,539. Collector, 225,973. Legal, 70,000. Personnel board, 290. Information technology, 289,342. Town clerk, 128,100. Registrar of voters, 97,731. Conservation, 129,978. Planning board, 187,533. Thank you. We have a hold on the planning board. Appeals board, 9,230. High school upkeep, 100,000. Town hall annex, 181,326. Property insurance, 250,000. Town reports, 100. Town farm, 1,500. Police department, 3,779,157. Fire department, 2,399,793. Building department, 135,151. Sealer of weights and measures, 4,162. Animal control, 86,114. Shellfish, 88,441. Parking tickets, 10,050. Westport Community Schools, 19,495,683. We have a hold on the Westport schools. Regional school assessments, 1,967,371. Hold on regional school assessments. Highway Department, 874,586. Snow and ice, 150,000. Street lights, 5,000. Transfer Station, $340,118. Cemetery Department, $189,254. Veterans Graves, $1,700. Board of Health, $422,353. Commission on I beg your pardon? Hold on Board of Health. Commission on Disabilities, $1,000. Council on Aging, $230,113. Veteran Services, $445,817.
Hold.
Library, $286,115. Recreation, $61,121. Historical Commission, $1,275. Debt service principal payments, $2,788,557. Interest payments on long-term debt, $1,826,061. Serped, $3,057. Pension assessment, $3,060,550. Health and life insurance, $4,235,000. And that is the end. So, hearing no discussion on those line items that did not have a hold, with the exception of Board of Health, Veteran Services, Planning Board, Westport Community Schools, and Regional School Assessments, all those in favor of the remaining line items will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Those are carried unanimously. So we now return to the Planning Board to discuss that individually. Would someone like to begin discussion? Mr. Whiten?
Good morning, thank you. My name is Jim Whiten. I'm the chair of the Planning Board currently. And we would like to fund the assistant planner position for an additional amount of $65,000. And that would come from taxation.
So you're proposing to amend that figure to, not as quick with math as I used to be, to $252,533?
Correct.
Is there a second to that motion to amend?
Second.
We have a second. So, discussion on the motion to amend. Sir?
My name is John Bullard, Mr. Moderator. I'm also on the Planning Board. We have had this position authorized for a number of years.
Is everyone hearing him? Okay, good.
I'll bend over. It's especially critical this year, as people may know, our town planner does 85% of his work for the Planning Board and 15% of his work assisting the town administrator. And this year, as the moderator acknowledged, we may be in a position where the town administrator departs and the planner may have to spend a lot more time assisting the town in other duties. And that is going to cause a critical shortage in the Planning Board. And so this position, which has been funded before, is especially important this year. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. And before we entertain any more discussion, I apologize, I should have arranged a better system for this, but the back right corner here is reserved for people who have an exceptional need for spacing because of their medical condition. Masks are required, and we ask that you sit only in the seats marked with the yellow X or someone next to you. But if you don't have a condition that requires you to be there, I would be really grateful if you would move somewhere else in the hall. And at the very least, you must have a mask on there and be seated in a yellow X seat. So if the seat does not have a taped yellow X on it, please move to one that does or elsewhere in the hall. Thanks. And Mr. Caesar, would I ask you to be kind enough to keep an eye on people as they walk in, and people don't know. That's my failure that I didn't make that obvious to folks. But if you would let them know that that area is reserved for that purpose, thanks. So we return to discussion of the motion to amend the budget for the planning board. Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you. My name is Paul Schmidt. South Coast Rail is coming to our area in less than 2 years, and it's going to bring a lot of changes to it. And I think it's very important for us to plan for those changes prospectively rather than trying to react to them. So for that reason, I think this modest expense is a very important investment in the town's future.
Thank you. Any further discussion of the motion to amend actually, I'm sorry, your motion would be to amend the salary appropriation to, sorry, let me clean up a little uncertainty I did. I added the $65,000 to the total, so your motion is to amend the salary appropriation to $201,643. Is that correct, Mr. Whiten?
Just trying to do the arithmetic quickly. 201,643.
Okay, so I apologize for misstating the total for the motion he was making. So the motion is to amend the salary appropriation to the planning board from $136,643 to $201,643. Is there anyone confused by my unclarity on that? Okay, good. So any further discussion on that motion?
Mr. Moderator, may
That was an accident waiting to happen. Yes,
I speak on the?
please.
Okay. The Finance Committee has met, as you know, the Finance Committee has met with multiple departments in the budget process, both on the town and the school side. We also met with the Planning Board, and that request was put in for an additional assistant planner, not only this year, but in prior years. There is no sustainable revenue as far as taxation is concerned to support this. If, in fact, we were to support this through taxation, we probably would need a special town meeting if we found out that there wasn't enough money to pay for this position. When the Finance Committee met, we heard the Planning Board's plea for an assistant town planner. We know that that's a very important position in this town to move the town forward. But we did not, it's not that we didn't support it, there wasn't enough money in the budget to support it. And there still remains today, here at town meeting, not enough money to support an assistant town planner. I just wanted everyone to be clear on that.
Like I said, and I want to offer a little explanation of something here too for the good of the meeting. One of the powers of town meeting is that we appropriate the town's funds. That doesn't mean we spend them. We give permission to other entities to spend them. We just gave permission to all kinds of different departments to spend a certain amount of money. So the budget that we see is based on the Finance Committee's very careful evaluation of what they expect to be available revenue. I trust they would agree that that number is not certain to the penny. It's a wise estimate. Town meeting can appropriate as much money as we want. We can appropriate trillions if we choose to. But when the pennies are counted and we find out what we actually have, the state requires that we proceed into the year with a balanced budget. So if it turns out that there is not enough money from that source for this purpose, we would have to return for a special town meeting in which we would deal with that discrepancy and get ourselves back to a balanced budget. So I would like to understand what you can and can't do and what the consequences of those things are. Mr. Vieira?
Mr. Moderator, I think it's important on this article that we clarify a little bit for town meeting purposes. There are available funds. We heard about chronic deficits, and it's a question of short-term and long-term planning. And what do we have in, so to speak, our coffers right now to spend? There may be funds available in the fall. There probably will be for federal COVID relief funds. We have free cash today we could use in addition to our appropriation. We already increase our taxes each year. We have the ability anyways to increase it by 2.5%. So there are funds available, and maybe what we should be concentrating in this meeting, in for example, this particular article, is to look at the personnel that's necessary in an operating budget to move for the next 12 months. And maybe the next 12 months will be a little shaky. But I respect the Finance Committee. I was chair of the Finance Committee for many years. I appreciate the work they do. I respect the selectmen and what they do and the other town employees and the school committee. We're going to have some hard decisions today. But let's take care of the operating budget for the next 12 months. If we have to borrow a little bit from some savings, being free cash for this time, even though it's one-time funds, as a former chair of the selectmen, a former chair of the Finance Committee, I suggest you do that. And let's get through these next 12 months. We're finally open and sitting down talking. Things are changing. But the economy is such that we can't afford, as was suggested, the only way we're going to get through this is an override for 2.5. We may get it at town meeting. I don't think we're going to get it at the ballot, though. And then we're going to be back for the town meeting anyways. So let's look at short-term and long-term planning. I support this motion. I think we need an assistant town planner. We may have to cut some of our capital expenditures as we move forward. We may have to delay the purchase of a truck or two until September, October, November. We probably won't need it till then. There are some things we can do. We need to start planning for that. But let's not cut off. Well, we've got a school that's opening up, and we're going to be dealing with that later on. We're going to cut staff, and we can't even supply people in the school to do the job. We need a planner. We've got a revenue stream that may develop. We've got a town planner I've worked with him on a school building committee. He's doing a super job. But there's only so many hours in a day, and we're draining that person so much over the years. I think the planning board has come before us. Let's check this out for the next 12 months and see what the difference would be if we have the manpower to get the job done. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to stop again and ask once more. The back right section is for people who have exceptional needs to be spaced because of their medical condition. If your medical condition does not require you to be spaced more than the rest of the room, would you please move to another part of the hall? If your medical condition does require you to have that extra spacing, please sit only in a seat with a yellow X on it. I will walk back there if I have to identify the seats and the yellow X's, but I would really rather not. It would not be possible with the yellow X's for people to be seated in rows immediately behind one another. Would you please look at your seat and see if it has a yellow?
She showed me the numbers. That number that he has, 40,000, it's not right. Because she said it was already built into the revenues. Oh, this is getting to be bananas. What are we gonna get?
Okay. Ms. Barron, I believe you are speaking next on the motion to amend the planning board salary item from $136,643 to $201,643. Please.
Thank you. I had, through the moderator, a question for the town administrator. With regard to the budget, I know there's talk of us getting funds from the federal government and from the state government to be coming at some undetermined point, I believe in the fall, and I'm wondering what impact that is going to have on the budget, and can that money be used to fund this particular position and whatever else is coming up after us.
So your question is, what funds may become available to us, when they will become available, and can they be used to fund this position?
Yes, and not just this position. I know we're going to have other things coming up, and whether we can address that now.
Okay, I'm just going to pass on the question about this position, because that's what we're talking about right now.
Thank you.
Mr. King?
The answer is no. It couldn't be used for that purpose.
Thank you.
Do
Mr.
you know
Moderator.
how much funds we are getting?
We're getting a...
Mr.
one-
King, can you tell us how much we may be receiving in funds?
1,600,000, I believe, 28,000.
And is that through the moderator coming from the state or the federal government?
Mr. King, from the state or the federal government?
Federal government.
Okay, and are we getting any more funds through the moderator from the state?
Will there be any further from the state?
No.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Moderator, I have a point of information, if I can. After,
You will have an opportunity to speak after everyone else has had their first chance. Ms. Lose?
My name is Jane Lose. I would like to remind everybody that there were some exceptional adjustments to the previous fiscal year's budget, which is recorded in Article 2.
Can you speak a little more directly into the microphone? Thank you.
I would like to remind everybody that there was some additional funding that has already been acknowledged in Article 2. There's something close to $200,000 that came from employee benefits expenses, which were transferred to cover other accounts. If, in fact, the budgeting processes have not changed significantly between the years, this just shows you that there is a $200,000 swing on one budget category, employee benefits expenses, going to other items in this article in the current fiscal year. That makes me feel confident that there's bound to be enough money somewhere in order to fund this most important position for our future of our town.
Okay, Mr. Whiten, you have yet to speak on the amendment.
Correct. I would like to point out that fiscal year 21 budget included $45,000 for this position. We did not expend it. It's going back into free cash at the end of this month. So our increase is only $16,270 total from last year's budgeted amount. So I think that it is really, really important for the planning board to get the assistant planner position. It would allow the planner to concentrate on doing grant applications, which the town has received several. But you know, he is really, really stretched thin. So we really need to fill this position.
Thank you, Mr. Valcourt.
I would just like to point out that the select board did, in fact...
Identify yourself, even though we are...
I'm sorry, Brian Valcourt, Tickle Road. I would like to just point out that the select board did vote unanimously to support this position. Or not?
It's not unanimous.
Oh, it's not unanimous. It's 4 to 1, I do believe, that we voted to support this position. And just to give you a history, you know, we do budget extremely conservatively every year. We try to make sure that we're not, you know, short cash at the end of the year. And I've been on the board now 7, 8 years, and total, and in that time, I don't believe I've ever seen a free cash number less than $300,000 every year. Generally, it's between $600,000 and $1.2 million almost every year that we have left over in free cash at the end of the year. So I think there is more than enough revenue here, whether it comes from taxation or free cash, to fund this particular position, and it is desperately needed. And as Mr. Bullitt pointed out, or previous speaker, excuse me, pointed out earlier, our town planner may very soon be asked to do some very serious duties as far as helping out and assisting, or possibly even becoming the new town administrator. So this is a position that needs to be funded, and it needs to be in place so that we're not stuck. If our planner moves up to, another position or moves on to another position, we're not stuck with someone who has no experience and no boots on the ground here. This is a very important position. I understand the Finance Committee's position that they want to budget conservatively, but budgeting conservatively, still, we end up with a minimum $200,000 to $300,000 extra at the end of the year, which we then, as you see, we move to appropriate $200,000 this year toward positions that, different budget line items that we needed to spend money on. And so I don't think this is a risky thing. It's $65,000. It's actually only, as a previous speaker had pointed out, it's only $16,000 more than what they asked for last year. So I rise in complete support of this.
Thank you. Mr. Carrero?
Mr. Moderator, just a couple points on the prior speaker here. The Finance Committee did, as mentioned, listen to the Planning Board. We know that the planning position is important. We do not recommend using free cash, as that is an unknown. I know that we say that we have $200,000 every year, but that is not a given. Free cash, as I mentioned in my opening statement, is not a guarantee for the town. On the other point I'd like to make on the ARA money that was previously mentioned at one of the speakers, it's the federal money that will be coming in, potentially be coming into the town. This money is, and I want to be clear, earmarked for the town. And keep in mind, earmarked doesn't mean that we will be getting the money. These rules were set by the U.S. Treasury and then sent down to the states. There are two types of communities that the Treasury has informed people that they're going to be, either eligible or an ineligible community. Westport is an ineligible community. So what that means is that the drawdown period or the drawdown process that Westport will have is totally different than your communities such as Lowell, New Bedford, Taunton, Fall River. We're going to be going through a different process. The allowable use of funds, and this is right off the Treasury's website, are three benchmarks. One, for the assistance of households, small businesses and nonprofits, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. Two, for the provision of government services to the extent that this was a reduction in revenue in property or income tax due to the public health emergency. The town already taxes at its levy capacity. The real estate collections are currently on target to what budgeted anticipated amounts were. And three, to make necessary investments to water and sewer or broadband infrastructure. Currently, the town does not have any shovel-ready projects for water, sewer, or broadband. So I know there's been a lot of talk about us receiving $1.58 million, but I think people have to know that this is just earmarked for the town. We have to meet those three credentials, and I have not seen anything else on any Treasury website or state website that tells any difference. So I just want town meeting members to understand that. Thank you.
Thanks. Someone... Is this on? Someone could have jumped up and said, I rise to a point of order, because we were not, the motion before us is to increase the planning board salary line item by $65,000 from taxation, not from anywhere else. So we're either going to have the money from taxation to do this, or we will have to return for a special town meeting. So is there any further discussion on the motion to increase the planning board salary line item from $136,643 to $201,643 with an additional $65,000 from taxation? Seeing none, all those in favor will please raise their hands. Those opposed? That is carried. So we move to Westport Community Schools, which is presently moved at $19,495,683. Would someone like to speak to that? Ms. Priestner? There, if you would.
I move to amend the appropriation for the Westport Community Schools from $19,495,683 to $19,935,683 with the additional $440,000 from free cash.
Is there a second to that motion? Second. We have a motion and a second. Would you like to begin discussion?
Good morning, Westport. My name is Tracy Priestner. I'm the proud mother of a graduate of Westport High School and a student currently enrolled at the high school. It is important to note that I am a member of the Westport Finance Committee, but I am not speaking on their behalf, nor am I representing their views at this time. In fact, the FinCom voted unanimously to support the budget as it stands. Rather, I'm here as a parent and a taxpayer. I'm very involved in Westport, and I believe this gives me a broad scope of knowledge of many things here in town. I stand here today only after having put in an enormous amount of hours examining each and every expense in the school budget. I can tell you the budget process by the Westport Community Schools was extremely open and transparent. More importantly, the district has a shortfall of $804,000 from the proposed budget of the town. However, because of the pandemic, Westport will have an influx of cash funded through the American Rescue Act of 2021. This Rescue Act money is a game changer. I believe it's imperative that we contribute to the needs of the school department in a year that has affected the educational environment like no other. And that is what I'm here to do today as a parent and a Westporter, to ask you, the citizens of Westport, to increase the budget of the Westport Community Schools by $440,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Nancy Tavares, School Committee Chair. Our Superintendent, Tom Aubin, is ill and
Can you
unable
speak a little more directly into the
Oh,
microphone?
sorry.
Thank you.
Our Superintendent, Tom Aubin, is ill and unable to join us today, so he's asked me to read the statement on his behalf. On behalf of the entire school community, I thank you for your attendance and participation at this
Can you
critical...
again be a little more direct into the microphone? Thanks.
On behalf of the entire school committee, I thank you for your attendance and participation at this critical town meeting. As there will be many issues to discuss, I will be brief. The budget that I submitted to the school committee for the 2022 school year is a lean budget as we can consciously submit. But be sure, this budget does not come close to satisfying the educational needs of the families of Westport. The $19,096,102 budget approved by our school committee does not add additional programming, staff, or security that would improve our delivery of educational services. The increase we requested was simply to cover additional cost of opening our beautiful new school in September. If we cannot get the support of our community with this incredibly humble request, the devastation will be felt by our families long after this meeting concludes. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Good morning. Nancy Stanton Cross. I'm the vice chair of the school committee and also a member of its budget committee. I know and I've heard and I've seen on social media and I hear around town, oh, the schools, they're coming back. They're asking for more money. It's always more. It's always more. I'm going to give you the facts because I have nothing other than the facts to rely upon with this presentation here before you. Last year, the year of the pandemic, the schools received an increase of 1.68% on their budget. This year, they received 2%, but it wasn't 2% on top of anything, it was 2% on top of 1.68. That comes to the prior 2 years, 1.84%. That doesn't even cover the cost of living increases. So when you talk about deficits, they're all over. I understand and I respect the Finance Committee and the town for their hard work. However, we're going into a new school. The representation of the school wants to bring drama. They're saying the transportation is going to go away and we're going to lose teachers. Yeah, we're going to lose teachers. You don't cut $804,000 when 85% of your budget is salaries and not lose teachers. We're going to lose 7 teachers, 3 teachers' aides, 1 administrator, and the transportation from the grades 9 through 12 will be significantly affected. People say to me, the parents pay for that bus transportation. That is not true. Parents do contribute, but I will tell you, each bus costs $75,000. We run 15 bus routes. The parental contribution doesn't make a slight dent in that. So these are the things that we need to do. And I'm asking that you support this from free cash. And I understand, budget deficits. And why do you think we're not before you asking for $804,000? Because we can't possibly come back from that next year. We came in with a conservative 440, which will allow us to maintain the programming and the transportation. We will have to reconfigure class sizes. We've done this. We will have to realign. We've done this. But with the 440, we can continue moving forward. We are going into a new school. We're creating, again, a middle school. We're reinstituting middle school sports. We're reinstituting drama and music for the middle school that has long been gone for 6 years since the middle school has been closed. You can't just do that on 1.68%. So I come before you and I ask, through the moderator, the town manager, he has stated that we are receiving in Westport $1.628 million. And I would like to ask him if the town of Westport has filed the form to request that money through the state. There's a DLS form to be filed in order for that money to be sent.
No.
Could I ask? I'm going to ask you if you'd please wait for me to pass that question along and not speak to one another directly. Thank you. By the way, you have 20 seconds left in your 5 minutes.
I am telling you that I spoke to Senator Mike Rodrigues. That money needs, that check is waiting in Boston. All we have to do is ask for it. It is coming to Westport. I am not stating anything but the facts. Please support this motion. Let's not be short-sighted when people talk about fire and police stations close together. Spend $95 million on a new school and then don't support inside. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sir?
How you doing? Mike Fernandez, Brothers Way. I just wanted to speak a little bit on this because I've had the opportunity to work with the superintendent a little bit over the last few months, and I've gotten a chance to see what his vision is for the school. And I'm a former student of Westport High School myself, and we are currently in the process of working an application to put an application with the schools to provide summer camps for some of these kids that's going to involve former professional volleyball players, Division II college coaches, former professional baseball players, homegrown right here in town, two of the only players ever to come out of this school to go on to play professional sports, to give back to the students. We're bringing a couple of UFC fighters.
Okay, we're going to bring this back to the school committee.
To support these schools, right?
Okay.
So the vision of keeping these kids here and not leaving the districts starts with an experience, and an experience that goes beyond just the classroom. It goes from what happens outside of the classroom. And if you don't fund the schools to be able to provide the experience for these kids, they're going to continue to leave. And I would ask you that you would support the schools and support the mission of the new superintendent of these kids, because we're going to change the lives of a lot of Westport residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan, you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm not one to normally to suggest spending one-time funds for operating expenses, but I have spoken to at least one of the...
Can you speak a little more directly into the microphone?
Certainly.
Yeah, that's the trick, is raising them up or lowering them down.
There you go. Is that any better?
That's great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'm not one to necessarily promote spending one-time funds on operating costs, but I'd really like to see the new school get off to a good start. And I think maybe next year is the year to hold their feet to the fire if we want to talk about budget cuts and such. So I rise in favor of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cole.
David Cole. Just briefly, the master plan called for more funding for the school system, and over the 5 years since that plan was adopted, the school budget has grown more slowly than the total town budget. And the education share has been squeezed in the town budget. And as we move into this opportunity with the new school, we need to give it the full support. And I salute the Finance Committee for facing up to the issues of override, and I think we have to get into a process over the coming year of implementing that override. And I see this as a first step of creating a need for additional funding that we will have to face during the coming year and I urge that we go ahead and vote this money now.
Thank you. Ms. Pearsall?
Nicole Pearsall. I just have a question for the school committee. So the work that the finance committee did on this, the budget and everything, the warrant in total, there's a sheet in here that says how much free cash is already earmarked in the warrant to be used, which has a remaining balance of $93,829. If the school committee gets their $440,000, is someone from the school committee going to make the decision as to what articles now will not get funded, what capital improvement equipment will not get funded? The assessor's revaluation will not get funded. The hazardous waste day will not get funded. No money will go into stabilization. And like I said, the assessor's software that they desperately need to put out the tax bills is not going to get funded, and all the capital improvements that are listed in the warrant are not going to get funded, which is police cruisers, which the...
Let's try and get, I mean, your point that,
Right.
that there's
The-
only so
the
much
point
money is
is-
valid, but let's not get too carried away with the other
Okay,
things.
so the point is that all the free cash that is earmarked in the warrant after this will not get funded if the $440,000 goes to the school department.
Thank you. I'm sorry that I'm going to interrupt the meeting one more time and remind folks that the back right section here is for people who have medical conditions that require them to be exceptionally spaced. And I apologize that we didn't make that obvious. That's my failure. But if you would do me the big favor of moving somewhere else in the hall, I'd really be grateful for that. Unless you have a medical condition which requires that, in which case, please sit in a seat marked with an X. Thanks. I appreciate that very much. So, Mr. Vieira?
Mr. Moderator, I rise in support of this article. And again, I'd like to explain real briefly what we're talking about here, folks, is we're not going to pit departments against departments or individuals against individuals, hopefully, at this meeting for budgets and how we spend our money. The answer to every question isn't more money, but it helps. And I would dare say the schools have been, as a previous speaker has mentioned, been the short end of that recently. And we have a superintendent and the school committee who's working at this and really making some strides to help our community in this regard. This isn't the time to say, well, we're going to not get that police cruiser, we're not going to get that truck, or we're not going to get that assistant planner. I think, as I said earlier, I think we ought to look at the personnel issues. It's driven by people, and we need to address the needs that we have to get the job done. And then in the fall, we'll come back, and money that's available, if it does come from the federal government or if it comes from other sources, we can address getting that extra police cruiser, or we can address getting that extra truck. But we need to be able to really provide the services at a level that's at least minimum for our town. And I think without funding this, we're not doing that with the schools, and we owe them that.
Thank you. Ms. Brown, I believe you were next.
My name is Cindy Brown. I speak in support of the needs of the schools and the many programs that they want to continue funding. My issue here is really one going back to the structural deficit we have. If you think about just your own personal finances at home, so think about moving into a new home. You only have X number of dollars every month that comes in to your budget, and you're going to dip into savings every single month to just pay your bills. That can only go on for so long until your savings is gone. And what happens the following year when your savings are gone, but you still have this big bill to pay year after year? We're setting ourselves up for a new base for the following year, and you have to understand that our taxation limitation has already been reached. So we have to figure out a different way to continue to pay for this. I understand there's, this big target of this federal money coming in. Don't count on it. When it comes in, then we can decide how we can spend it, and if we can spend it, and how it can be spent for some of these things. But we really have a structural deficit problem that is not going to be solved by $440,000 here or there. It comes at the expense of other needed items. So we have to decide as a town, can we continue to afford to do business this way? So if we don't have a Prop 2.5 override this year, as a previous speaker had indicated, keep that in mind for the future. It's my understanding that the school committee has not settled their collective bargaining agreement with the Teachers Association yet. We're going to be back here at some point looking for additional funds for not only the schools, but perhaps for other personnel issues for salary increases. If we don't have free cash, and if we're spending all of our free cash today, and our taxation limit has been spent, I don't know if we're going to pass around a collection plate to come up with the funds for the additional collective bargaining. This is not the last meeting that we're going to have for the fiscal year 22 that's going to cost money. And right now, based on the amounts of money that have been thrown around, we're out of it. We're done. We're out of money. Until that federal money shows up with no strings attached, we can't count on that. We absolutely cannot count on that. So I think it would be a foolish endeavor to continue to think that that's going to be our savior for this year. It's not going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leach, I believe you were next.
Sean Leach, I'd like to call the question.
Thank you. So for those of you who are new to town meeting, a motion to call the question is to determine whether we have heard enough discussion on this and we're ready to proceed to a vote, or if we want to discuss it further. So this is not a debatable motion, although I do need a second. All right, so we have a motion and a second to call the question. So we're going to now vote on whether or not to stop debate on this question. If you feel like you have heard enough and you know how you're going to vote on the motion on the motion to amend the Westport Community Schools budget, if you feel like you know how you're going to vote, you don't need to hear any more discussion, you're going to vote yes in this next vote. If you feel like, no, I really am not sure yet, I want to hear some other speakers, then you're going to vote no. Is that clear to everyone? Okay. And if anyone is unclear on that, please say something and I'll repeat it again. So, all those in favor of calling the question, suspending debate, and moving directly to a vote on the motion to amend will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that is carried by a clear 2/3 majority, so we're going to now move directly to a vote on the motion to amend the Westport Community Schools budget from the figure that you see printed in the warrant to $19,935,683 with an additional $440,000 coming from free cash. All those in favor of that amendment will please raise their hands. Those opposed? That is carried. So we now move to regional school assessments. The motion before us is $1,967,371. Would someone like to speak to that? Sir, can you tell me if you're moving to a microphone or... Yeah. Okay, so apparently there is no discussion of the motion for regional school assessments for $1,967,371. So all those in favor of that will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. We now move to Board of Health, and the motion before us is $422,353. Would someone like to speak to that? Ms. Ryden?
Hi, my name is Tanya Ryden. I'm chair of the Westport Board of Health. I request...
Can you speak a little more directly into the microphone?
I request an amendment to increase the salary line item by $14,408 to a total of $409,023. Excuse me, $409,723, and for the total budget to increase to $436,731. with the funds from free cash.
Okay. And that motion doesn't need to include the total, because if we amend the salary, the total will be changed. So we have a motion to increase the Board of Health salaries line item from what you see printed in the warrant to $409,723, which is an increase of $14,408. Is that correct?
Correct.
Coming from free cash. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Would you like to begin discussion?
Sure. This is a small amount of increase as a result of late contract negotiations between the Board of Selectmen and our Director of Public Health, Matt Armendo, as well as some minor adjustment in staffing pattern to accommodate the fact that our Director of Public Health oversees 4 departments with 10 direct staff reports and no supervisory positions available. So this is a small increase to cover contractual obligations and staffing adjustments. Thank you.
Any further discussion of the motion to amend the Board of Health salaries line item? Seeing none, all those in favor of increasing the Board of Health salaries line item by $14,408 to $409,723 will please raise their hands. Those opposed? That is carried. We now move to Veteran Services. The motion before us is $445,817.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes?
I move that we amend the Veteran Service budget by increasing the salary line item by $3,633 for a total of $55,000 for that line item and a total department budget of $449,450.
So we have a motion and a second to amend the salaries line item for Veteran Services upward by $3,663 to a total of $55,000.
And I've neglected to include the source being from taxation.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Sir?
Yeah, I just want to, Justin Latini, President of Vietnam Veterans. Again, just let the taxpayers know, this is a position that's been underfunded for several years. Our Veteran Service Officer services over 900 veterans and families in town. It's not a 5-day-a-week job. This is on-call, veterans in crisis. We've done some research. We've approached the town manager as well as the selectmen. We've presented our facts that this position, again, has been underfunded for such a long time, and we need to make sure that this position stays strong for the veterans here in Westport. And so, although the veterans feel that the salary is still lower than it should be, we are accepting this increase at this time, but we want to make sure the taxpayers understand that the Veteran Service Officer here in Westport has done an amazing job for our veterans. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion of the motion to amend the salary line items under Veteran Services as described? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. Sorry, I threw you a curveball with the eye rather than the hand. So that completes the budget item, Article 5. So we will now recess the annual town meeting, and we'll call to order the special town meeting. I've managed to lose my slide changer. Give me just a minute.
Steve, can I ask you a question?
Thank you very much. Okay. Article 1, to see if the town will vote to accept General Laws, Chapter 64N, Section 3, to impose an excise on the retail sale of marijuana for adult use at the rate of 3% or act on anything related thereto, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Carrero, will you give us a motion?
I move that, Mr. Moderator, move the town adopt the provision of Article 1 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Oh, I'm sorry, Finance Committee recommendation, please.
Mr. Moderator, Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 1 unanimously.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. May I have a motion to dissolve the special town meeting?
So moved. Second.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none of those in favor of dissolving the special town meeting will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried. Special town meeting is dissolved.
Mr. Moderator, point of
Yes.
order. Would you allow the Finance Committee 10 minutes to adjourn to talk on the remaining articles for the free cash, as we have not voted on the articles that remain? Free cash is changed. We have not made even 5 minutes.
Okay, we'll take a recess of 5 minutes requested by the Finance Committee to discuss response to some changes in free cash numbers. So we will, bathroom breaks, drinks of water, and we will reconvene at 10:31.
But we can't pay for, there's not enough funding remaining to pay for both.
10:36.
So
10:36.
So we keep the telephone and keep the fiber optic, but then change the cable to be more than 200? To make the cable the whole 275?
No, I would say source of funding that you would need. Yeah, you increase that amount for cable TV.
So make the whole 265.
Cable TV.
So then we still have.
That removes any free cash, so that.
No, we don't, we still have 247,000 of free cash, so if you do.
No, I mean, it removes the free
Right,
cash
right.
from the.
So if we have the if we do the 275 for the school, then we have 247 left. So what do we spend that on? Do this, cover and do the assessors?
Yeah, I think that we have to
I
do
think we
that.
have to do 100 for the assessors, and then maybe 75 for fire,
For what?
for the fire equipment.
Is he here?
Like we just bought those new cruisers out of general fund money, so that we're gonna have to defer the cruisers, we're gonna have to defer the truck.
I think so, unfortunately. And the highway department. He needs that truck, so.
But then we could fund, if we fund the telephone replacement and the assessor software, and then change the fiber optic. The assessor's it's later in the article. It's Article 16.
Article 16. Oh, okay. Okay, so that's. Yeah. Yeah, I'm good with that. I think that's what we need to.
Hold on, let me ask this.
I think we can fund his. I think we can fund his. Yeah, because if we do 275 for the school, for the telephone, 100 for the stuff. Well, what are they gonna?
Yeah, let me get Brian up here quick, just to make sure we're
We have organizations on the Cape that provide assistance for single parents, single mothers. So when you go to college? Your dad probably said the same thing about you.
We did. Fortunately, I didn't spend the 2 years in the so yes, it's a yes.
What's your wife pay?
Kids,
Thing that I've always found disturbing is the lack of support for foster children, lack of support for particularly foster children who never get adopted, but then they have to transition to foster children.
one of your predecessors had a project for that. He replaced two guys.
You had Coughlin. Oh, thank you, Paul. Very kind of you. Thank you. Oh, Jack? Jack Healy.
Jack Healy. Mayor John
Former principal for Ellsworth State to teach people to read at the library.
Yeah, he gave me, when he found out my kids and this gave me a bunch of material. See it? Is that awesome?
They're about a year older than me.
You know, we were always, I don't know if it was when you were growing up, when I was growing up, it was always running in. And so, it's about 60.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Well, because, you know, my dad was a firefighter.
Yeah.
So,
when did you actually start working? You've been working over 50 years.
Yeah, I had paper routes.
So anything you and your wife would want to do?
See, I think if it were just the two of us.
Yeah. You got 4 years, right?
Right.
You got 4 years until he gets out of high school.
And that's part of it, because I think if it were just us, you know, we could be okay for the deal.
Yeah.
We could go far and part of the US, so we could travel, because we both like traveling.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is not
You got 4 years, right?
4 years.
Yep.
Well, 5 or 6.
Oh, why 4, 5, or 6? 4 years. Set a date.
Yeah. John Giorgio's retiring this year. He's turned 73.
You see how long 5 minutes?
Set a date.
Because you
Would you like to spend more time at
the
Plymouth?
planning board took all the taxation.
Yeah,
Because
well, see
the
if I
planning
get
board
there
took
today.
5,000, we had 44,000 extra taxation, but the planning board took 65, so.
Oh,
You're
no.
Have you seen
Yeah,
him in the
I've heard of
news?
him, yeah.
This guy showed up,
They can eat each
had
other.
a giant bear.
Wonderful.
So today's the first day that the parking restrictions go into place. Sure.
Are you going to be able to talk about the place law, the perimeter zoning, marijuana places?
Are you talking about the grandfather issue? Yeah, I can give you a statutory strike citation.
And it's from Westport. It's the Westport.
Well, it doesn't look like a case.
But if I call on you during that thing, can you just hold the case?
I can say that it's in
Did you read my bi-weekly report? On the bi-weekly talking about the application for the new fund, the application process, the American Recovery Act. But it also, I include a page of what the money that they spent. And it's fairly strictly prescribed. I tend, I don't see, I'm not trying to be optimistic. I don't see it as, I know you listen to people when it comes to budget time, but I'm not really optimistic that we've got some ways to really practice.
See, just so Tom here and Mike Sullivan supported it. So that means they got coalition for the school. So we'll get the marijuana, or they vote against marijuana. So they I knew how I cut 440.
So one of the areas that you can identify of
So that get that's one of the that's the other owner of Coastal View. Oh, okay. That's oh, right here. Okay. I thought they lived in Westport. I thought they were local. Why were they from there? She's from Dartmouth. I mean, it's pretty though.
So we could use some of that money to boost up one or two of the revenue sources. For example,
You know, I thought of that when I was walking in. We don't bring hard candies. I have to show up in the office to get
So you still don't have anything right now?
Their son is my son.
It's a neat stick. From my front door,
See, that discussion didn't last. It takes me. So when they just, I guess it's how long they're on.
Surgeries on
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, two on this knee and one on this knee. He's one on.
Suppose that what they're changing is all recommended radical. Appropriate, only creative stabilization.
He was there when I was there.
Well, I know that, yeah, I know that.
But this doesn't allow for borrowing. So,
That would motivate it. This is not getting our land.
He hates poverty. He's like so antisocial. He wants to be an artist. His goal in life is to be honestly, and he's getting he's certified for the welding and everything and scuba. He's going to school in Maine. He was supposed to go to California, but we found a program in Maine.
this one isn't as dramatic as I thought it was.
So I know someone who does that for the city of New Bedford. If you ever, do you know John Harland?
I think we're in trouble next year.
My wife's cousin's husband
Next year
does
they're
it.
gonna have to cut it.
So he knows from that, and then my brother owns part one of Sunshine Inn, which they provide labor from the eastern seaboard to every shipyard. Yeah, so, you don't understand yet. Once he gets all those certifications, he has something actually apply for citizenship. They're special forces operations for their Navy SEALs. That's what he wants to do. That's his ultimate goal. Whether or not he accomplishes it, but that's what he wants. So he wants to be as anonymous as humanly possible. Like you can Google him, and you will only get 3 hits on his name if you Google him. He only goes. He built his own computer when he was 13 years old, right? So he only operates on the dark web. He never operates on the regular web. He is like as anonymous. He has the most anonymous electronic signature. Everything that his everything that he does like online is done with aliases. He never uses web. He's got like 5 different aliases. Krieger, Makarov, Magnum 1.
All right, break time's over. Time to get back to work. Would everyone please move toward their seats so we can resume?
This kid hasn't returned. He's got whatever I got. He's like three. I can tell you anything about.
That probably makes sense. There's a lot of rooms there.
Any weapon system ever made. That's any vehicle, any car, any sports car.
So will Westport's annual town meeting now return to order? And would everyone please take their seats?
Okay, he makes like $30 an hour.
Would everyone please take their seats? Would everyone please take their seats? Article 6, to see if the town will vote to appropriate and/or transfer from available funds a sum of money for the cost of various capital expenditures in accordance with the town's fiscal year 2022 capital improvement planning program as follows, and to determine whether this appropriation shall be raised by borrowing or otherwise undertaking the action relative thereto, sponsored by the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. Mr. Carrera, may we have a motion, please?
Could you repeat that, Steve?
May we have a motion under Article 6, please?
Yeah, we need to change them.
So I would suggest that you say the language that we have there, I move that the town appropriate.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town appropriate or transfer the amounts listed from the following sources listed for the capital expenditures listed under Article 6 as follows.
Not, because we don't want to reference the ones listed.
Okay. I move that the town appropriate or transfer the amounts listed for the funding sources listed for the capital expenditures as follows. Okay. So the telephone replacement town school, $275,000 from free cash. Police cruisers, 2 police cruisers, $100,000 from free cash. And then all of it from the cable. Fiber optic cable, $265,000 from the cable TV fund. And then the what we would present, Mr. Moderator, for the next two, because for the fire, we don't have enough money to fund the rest of it.
Okay.
So what we
We're
would
making a motion now, so what we want town meeting to do is what we're saying right now.
right. What we'd want town meeting to do here is for the fire department extrication equipment, $75,000, and the highway truck replacement. Our recommendation was free cash, but now we would ask for the stabilization with the caveat to replace the stabilization money at a future town meeting.
Okay, now we're getting into discussion here. So would I be correct in saying that your motion is that the town appropriate or transfer the amounts to follow from the funding sources to follow for the capital expenditures listed under for capital expenditures in accordance with the town's FY22 capital improvement program, including the cost of undertaking the projects and of purchasing and equipping items as specified, as well as all incidental and related costs, with each item being considered appropriation, a separate appropriation, and those being $275,000 for free cash from telephone replacement, town/school, police cruisers 2 replacement, $100,000 from free cash, fiber optic cable, $265,000 from cable TV, and fire department extrication equipment, $75,000 transferred from the stabilization fund. Highway heavy truck replacement, $153,250, transferred from stabilization fund. Would that be your motion?
That is correct.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. May I have the Finance Committee recommendation, please?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action under Article 6 unanimously.
Thank you. So, once again, we find ourselves with a multiple line item article. And so I will read each line item. Although we will do the first four, we're going to need to vote, first three, we're going to need to vote 4 and 5 separately because they require a different quantum of vote. So telephone replacement, town/school, $275,000 from free cash. Police cruisers, 2, replacement, $100,000 from free cash. Fiber optic cable, $265,000 from cable TV. Okay, so we're going to, since there's no discussion of telephone replacement, town/school, $275,000 from free cash, all those in favor of that appropriation will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that is carried unanimously, and we scratch that one off the list. Now we're going to move to fire department extrication equipment, which we're going to deal with individually because it requires a 2/3 vote to appropriate from the stabilization fund. So, fire department extrication equipment, $75,000 from the stabilization fund. No, I'm asking for a hold. We already have that as a motion. Highway heavy truck replacement, $153,250 from the stabilization fund. Okay, so we will now, since we heard no discussion on fire department extrication equipment with $75,000 from stabilization fund, all those in favor of that appropriation will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. That is carried unanimously. We now return to police cruisers, $100,000 from free cash. Mr. Vieira.
Mr. Moderator, I rise in questioning the police cruisers at this time. I'm not opposed to getting new cruisers. My understanding is we do have a fleet, and we might even have a couple extra. I've heard the number of maybe 3 extra. I'm just suggesting that maybe we could look at the police cruisers in the fall when we see actually what we have for federal monies, and I think maybe we could kind of negotiate a couple of cruisers out of there. I would bow to the discretion of the chief of police if he's here and he wants to speak to that, but I don't think it's going to cause a tremendous problem if we hold off spending this money now and we come back at a fall town meeting, because we'll be back at a fall town meeting dealing with other issues anyways.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the motion for $100,000 from free cash for 2 police cruisers replacement? Seeing none, all those in favor will please raise their hands. Those opposed? That is defeated. We now move to fiber optic cable, $265,000 from cable TV. Mr. Vieira?
I'm supporting the using cable TV's funds for this and not using any free cash. But I am confused, and I'd like some clarity from the Finance Committee. How much do we have in the account for cable TV? Because I asked 3 people here today who I thought would know that answer, and nobody even had a figure close to what the amount would be. I've heard a range close to $1 million, and others that if we take the 65, we're going to wipe out the account. I'm assuming it's closer to 700 to $1 million, but could somebody clarify that for me? What do we have in the account if we're taking another 65 out of that account?
Mr. Carrero, can you tell us what we have in that account?
I would defer to through you, Mr. Moderator, the town administrator. Or some.
Mr. King, can you tell us?
He's correct. It's between $700,000 and $1 million.
Thank you. Sir?
Alexander Kropf. I speak in favor of this line item, and I would like to point out that here we see the first consequence of riding roughshod over the balanced budget proposal that the Finance Committee had issued.
Okay, let's stick to this article. Thank you. Mr. Vieira?
Mr. Moderator, I've been listening all day about the problems that we have in financing in this town. I just heard it again. We have close to...
Are we talking about fiber optic cable?
Yes,
are we talking about fiber optic cable?
We're talking about fiber optic cable, and what we're talking about is a budget that we could use of over $700,000, and all we're saying is we're taking $65,000 from that over $700,000 and applying it to this account, not using free cash that we could use for other purposes. It's just good budgeting, folks. This is ridiculous. And we shouldn't be suggesting that other storms are coming. We have a new police station, fire station, schools, and we haven't raised the taxes. Let's take it slowly here. Short-term and long-term planning. It's the same way we handle our household.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion of the motion to appropriate $265,000 from cable TV for fiber optic cable? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Sorry to keep you guessing on whether it's going to be hands or voice vote, but I'm getting to where sometimes I can guess those pretty well. So we now move to highway heavy truck replacement, $153,250 from the stabilization fund. Mr. Vieira.
Again, it's just a housekeeping situation from a budget standpoint. I suggest we do this in the fall. We probably, no question, need a truck, but I'm not sure we're going to use the truck that much between now and the September meeting. Let's see how much egg money we have to pay for a truck in the fall, if you use a farmer's term, if you would. Thank you.
Thanks. And I hope people realize that the numbers that you see up there and the sources that you see up there are what we thought this was going to be before some things changed. And the whole reason for the recess was to make some changes to that. So we are now discussing that the motion before us is highway heavy truck replacement, $153,250 from the stabilization fund, not from free cash as you see on the screen. I apologize for not explaining that earlier.
Mr. Moderator, may I make a
Mr. Carrera, yes.
modification? Due to the previous modification that we had, not spending, I'd like to make a motion that we modify this funding source from free cash instead of stabilization account, $75,000.
So it is now stabilization. You're going to suggest that we amend the funding source to free cash?
Correct. For the fire.
Right.
For the fire.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend the funding source for highway heavy truck replacement from stabilization fund, which is where it stands now, back to free cash, which is where it looks.
I don't think so.
Beg your pardon? We've already voted that. Okay. It was already voted as stabilization.
Okay.
Yep. So we remain with, at this point, highway heavy truck replacement, $153,250 from stabilization. That is the
Mr.
motion
Moderator?
before us now. Yes, Ms. Schufeld.
So Shauna Schufeld, I'm the chair of the Board of Selectmen, but I'm speaking on my own behalf. I think it's a mistake to fund this vehicle from stabilization. I think stabilization is a rainy day fund. I think it's better to defer the purchase. I hope that we are able to defer this purchase because I think it's necessary, but I think it would be a mistake to fund from stabilization.
Thank you. Mr. Crowe?
Mr. Moderator, I'd like to make a comment. In just an hour ago, we spoke about not having to pin departments against departments, but here we are trying to shovel out money for the public safety in the town, both police and fire, and we cannot find room now in the budget to support police and fire. And I just think that we're saying on one hand where we can't, you know, it's okay to spend free cash, but on the other hand, we're trying to kick that can down the road to spend free cash on public safety. So I would not support us just going over this and not supporting it to fund.
Okay. Mr. Vieira, on the highway heavy truck replacement from stabilization.
I would suggest at the meeting today that I'm certainly not trying to encourage anybody to vote against police or vote against the highway department. Those folks do a super job, and we're here to support them. We're talking about whether we spend money now with limited funds, not knowing what we're getting over the summer, but we know we're going to get some, and having a town meeting in the fall. Talking in June 5th right now, we're probably going to have a town meeting in September, October, November. We can do these purchases at that point. Again, as the chair of the selectmen said, it's bad business to use a stabilization fund for this right now. And we're not trying to pit departments against departments. We're trying to do short-term and long-term planning. You don't wear your winter coats in the summertime. It's that kind of logic.
Thank you. Ms. Rouse?
Hi, yes, Karen Rouse. I also agree that it's not appropriate at this time to fund a capital improvement through the stabilization. It further determines that we really need to have a special town meeting and need to be considering an override option because we just don't have the ability to fund all the things that the town needs to fund. So I'm not in favor of a stabilization for this either.
Mr. Valcourt?
Well, I would like to support the, replacement of the highway truck. I would like to make an amendment then, since we voted down the 100,000 for the police cruisers. I would like to make an amendment to that we fund the 100,000 of that from free cash and 53,250 from the stabilization fund. And that way we get this truck. It's a several month process to send bids out and then come back with a price and then finally get to an agreement to buy a vehicle. So this vehicle wouldn't be purchased probably until September anyway. And if they have to wait for September to go out to bid, they might not get an actual bid and everything back and approved by the selectmen until December or January. And this truck is desperately needed to plow our roads. If you want your roads plowed by a truck that's reliable, that's not breaking down every 10 minutes, this is something that we're going to need. This is a dump truck with a plow. This is very important, very necessary for the highway department. The highway department has been operating with 6 individuals. Their normal complement is 8 individuals plus a foreman. They have had neither the foreman or those 8 individuals funded for the past 15 years that I'm looking at. Very rarely have they had 8 total individuals in the department, which is minimal to maintain 169 miles of roads that we have in town. I know it doesn't sound like that, but we have 160 miles.
Let's stick to the
of
truck,
roads.
though. Let's stick to the truck as opposed to the
This truck
highway
is very
department general.
necessary to plow those roads, and they need this now so that it can get the ball rolling. If we can change this and put this money back into the stabilization fund in the fall, great. But right now, they need a truck now, and they need it before winter hits. So I'm moving that we amend that to 100,000 from free cash and 53,250 from stabilization.
So is there a second to the motion to amend the funding source for highway heavy truck replacement from where it is now to 100,000 from free cash, 53,250 from stabilization? Is there a second? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. We are now discussing that amendment. So Ms. Barron, on the amendment?
Well, I guess it relates to the amendment in that I have a question about whether town meeting has the capacity to, or the authority to do short-term borrowing.
No. Not under this article, no.
I'm sorry?
Not under this article. This article says that we may raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds.
Is there any article under which we could try to do short-term borrowing to say?
Only those articles that specifically identify borrowing in their text, and they would not really offer us the flexibility to do this.
May I ask through town council whether or not there is
Of course.
an opportunity to do any kind of borrowing here at town meeting?
So how would I phrase your question? That can we do short-term borrowing under any article on the warrant? Although I'm going to have to ask how that's going to relate to what we're doing right now.
Because we are having trouble funding a lot of the things that we need right now. And short-term borrowing, I mean, I'm chairing the school building committee. We are doing short-term borrowing to finish our project, and the borrowing rate is somewhere around 1%. We're utilizing Unibank. And I'm just wondering whether or not, rather than trying to figure out, if we have to wait or not wait, if we have things that are critical to running this town, wouldn't it just make sense to try to borrow $1 million or somewhere around that amount to ease our struggle in funding what we need?
Taking nothing away from the validity of that idea, we're right now trying to decide whether we want to change the funding source for a highway heavy truck replacement from 153,250 from the stabilization fund to 100 from stabilization, 53,250, 100 from free cash, and 53,250 from stabilization. That's the question before us right now. So, and under this article, we cannot do short-term borrowing. And one of the things that keeps us moving along as quickly as we can, is making sure that we just talk about what we're talking about right now. So there may be another article that comes up where that borrowing would be possible, but it is not under this one, so it doesn't really make sense to talk about it under this article. I hope that
Can I
makes
just
sense.
Can I just ask whether or not, through town council, whether or not there is an article where we could make that?
No, because we talk about one article at a time. That was one of the. Phrase that question again. I realize there are all kinds of money questions. If you can phrase that question again. So you want to know if there is an article on the warrant where we can do short-term borrowing.
Authorize short-term borrowing at this meeting. Yes.
Mr. Oh, okay. No, thanks. So my mistake. This article actually does offer borrowing as an option. So please, I apologize and thank you very much for correcting me on that. So this article can be funded by borrowing. This one can be funded by borrowing. So right now, we are trying to decide if we will change the funding source from stabilization to splitting it between free cash and stabilization. That is the question before us right now. So let's get on with that one and decide whether we want to do that or not. Then we can move on to some of our other options. Do you have anything more to say on that question?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Mr. Leach?
Called question.
Okay. So we understand what calling the question is. If you feel like you need more discussion on whether or not we should change the funding source under the highway truck replacement from all stabilization to $100,000 from free cash and $53,250 from stabilization. If you want to talk about that more, vote no. If you have heard enough and you're ready to vote on that amendment, please vote yes. So all those in favor of calling the question, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that is carried. So now we're going to vote on whether to change the funding source for the highway heavy truck replacement from $153,250 from stabilization to $100,000 from free cash and $53,250 from stabilization. Is there any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Can I see the hands of those in favor? I see the hands of those opposed. That is defeated. So we are now back to $150,000, $3,250 from stabilization. Right?
Or debt, I suppose.
Okay, so the motion before us now is, shall we appropriate $153,250 from the stabilization fund for a highway heavy truck replacement? Is there any further discussion on that motion?
Yes.
Sir.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Hi.
Sir, yes.
Yeah, Michael Sullivan, Drift Road. I got a question on this long discussion we're having about free cash versus stabilization and different sources of funding. Is that appropriate for now?
It is not. At this point, I mean, if you're
Well, my
going
question is
to
about
make
the-
some kind, propose an
about
amendment
free
that involves
cash.
free cash, we can do that. But right
Yeah,
now,
free
we're just
cash.
talking about whether we want to buy this truck from stabilization or not.
From stabilization, so my question is about stabilization. And my question relates to earlier in the morning, we heard about $1 million plus waiting at the state to come into the town of Westport. Will that trickle into stabilization? I don't understand, you know, I totally agree with the comments that are made, we're in a tight time. I heard that vet funds is to cover loss of taxation for vacation resort communities. I have to imagine food sales taxes for the past year has been down, so there's been a lot of fear factor and, well, we might not get the money. I have to imagine revenues from current fiscal year is down. So when that money, when that slip gets filled out and sent to the State House and we finally get that funds in, where will that end up in stabilization is my question for the appropriate party.
Okay, well I can tell you that it will only end up in stabilization if town meeting votes to put it there. So I can give you that much of an answer. Does that satisfy your question?
No.
Okay, then what is the question?
I would wonder
So
where that that cash will end up someplace because it's coming as a source of funds, and I'm just wondering where it would end up, so that as we balance the discipline of this tight budgetary time, I think we need to know where that funds is going to go and get it into town as soon as we can.
It's the nature of our process here with town meeting that we decide where funds that we have now go, but we
No,
can't.
I know that, but my question is based on the fact that we're hearing about a lot of zero balances and negative balances, and then over there is $1 million. I'd just like to know where that's going to go. That's, I
I'm
understand
sorry, so do you
the
have a question
process.
there? Do you have a question there that you want me to pass on?
Yes. As the revenue trickles into the town, when we finally fill out the paperwork, what account will it end up in? So that we can spend it.
What do you mean by the money?
The referenced $1 million plus that was part of the recovery plan, I believe it was titled as?
American Rescue Act? So,
Is it earmarked? I mean,
your question remotely related to the question before us is, in what fund will the American Recoveries
No, my
Act?
question was, will it end up in stabilization? 'Cause you
Okay, and I
insisted
can
it
tell
be
you,
related.
it will not unless town meeting votes to put it in stabilization.
So then alternatively to that, my question is, where is it going to end up? I can't address it any further because I don't understand your difficulty with my question. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, and I appreciate you offering to try and rephrase, but we have spent an awfully long time trying to decide whether we want to appropriate funds for a highway heavy truck replacement. And, you know, I'm going to go with Rule 4 of the Rules of Town Meeting, move it along as fast as we can without sacrificing the first three. So is there any further discussion of the motion? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Rouse, I apologize.
Yes, when the Finance Committee met during recess, we had asked the question and were unaware that this article would allow for debt. So I would like to change the motion for the highway heavy truck replacement from stabilization to borrowings for the $153,250.
So we have a motion to change the funding source to borrowing. Is there a second?
Second.
Excuse me, just a second.
Well, you don't have to repay it until next year's budget.
Two-thirds, right? Yep.
Two-thirds,
Okay, so we are now discussing whether we shall amend the funding source that is currently stabilization to borrowing. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor of amending the funding source to borrowing from stabilization will please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Those in favor, please raise their hands. Okay, I apologize. To clarify, the motion before us at present is to amend the funding source, which in our main motion was from stabilization. We are now proposing to, it's now proposed to amend it to borrowing. I'm sorry if I got that backwards, I apologize, and thank you for the correction. So, all those in favor will please raise their hands. Those opposed? Okay, that is carried. We now move to a decision on whether to, so our funding source is now amended to borrowing. So the question before us now is, shall we appropriate $153,250 from borrowing for a highway heavy truck replacement? Is there any discussion on that? Yes.
Sue Brayton, just to let you know, we have no funding in our budget for short-term borrowing. There was a zero line item for short-term borrowing. And also, just to keep in mind, if it is not excluded debt, it will seriously impact the next year's budget, because that will come right off the top.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion of the motion to appropriate that amount for the highway truck from borrowing? Seeing none, all those in favor will please raise their hands. Those opposed? That fails to achieve the two-thirds, well, let me see hands in favor again. Please hold the roll. Because it's borrowing. I'm sorry, and those opposed? I'm going to have to count because I'm not sure. May I have 5 able-bodied volunteers to come up and help us with counting?
Oh, yeah, this is a tailspin. Tailspin city.
So if you would all step over in front of Bernadette to be sworn in, that would be great.
So as it stands right now, we'll come off the top of our budget next year. It's voted about.
Well, you could refinance.
Thanks, gentlemen and ladies.
This is craziness.
You have this all the way back, okay? You've got this all the way back. Tracy, you have this front center right there, and then right under the control booth there, okay? Yep. And Paul, you get a very easy, you have just the back section right over here. So not this front one, the back one, to the left of the control booth in the back, so behind the arch.
That section?
Yeah, but not that far, but not that far south. So just that one small section, okay? Right, right, and so I'm gonna ask you to both count in your head and count with the clicker so that you check to make sure you have that. So you have So, tellers, if you would please make sure you count your own votes and count both in your head and on your clicker counter, so that, and make sure that the totals add up in the end. So I'm going to ask all those in favor to please raise their hands and keep your hand raised until you get a clear point straight at you signal from the teller that your vote has been counted, after which you can lower it. But please, tellers, please point straight at people and let them know that their vote's been counted so they can lower their hand. So you need 2 hands for this job. One to point. This is in favor.
Right?
You did a 6 or 6,000?
John, are you this section?
Okay, so, yes. So, Brian, we still need to do no votes. Yeah, it's got to be, okay, yeah. Okay, so we still need to count no votes. Yeah.
9.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What do we have Zeros, right? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Sean. 42. Will those opposed to the motion please raise your hands and keep your hand raised until you get a clear signal from the teller that your vote has been counted? Yes. Yes, that's correct, yes. No. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much.
There's two people over here.
I'm sorry, are there people who think that they were not counted? Were you seated at the time that the... Okay, well, I'm going to check and see if we are within one vote, we will recount it. Okay. Can I see the hands of those in favor again? And the hands of those opposed? Okay. That is defeated, 77 to 111. So, we are finished with Article 6. That truck is not being purchased. That is not being purchased. We are finally finished with that. Today's attendance from Precinct A, 35, Precinct B, 120, Precinct C, 17, Precinct D, 56, Precinct E, 104, for a total of 332 dedicated citizens of Westport. So, Article 7, to see if the town will vote to repurpose a sum of money for capital improvement projects for which the projects have been completed or otherwise not needed at this time, and to appropriate and or transfer from available funds the sums to fund the projects recommended by the Capital Improvement Planning Committee with the town's fiscal year 2022 capital improvement planning program, and to determine whether this appropriation shall be raised by borrowing or otherwise, and to take the action relative thereto, sponsored by the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. May I have a motion, please?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town appropriate from the funding sources listed, the amounts listed for the purposes listed in Article 7 of the warrant.
Thank you. So again, we have a multiple line item article. Oh, may I have a second, please?
Second.
And thanks. And the Finance Committee recommendation, please?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the 7 unanimously.
So, multiple line item article, please say hold if you would like to discuss, remain silent if you would agree or vote yes. Fiber optic cable, $221,135 with $100,000 coming from Westport Elementary School stormwater drainage, $100,000 from police station feasibility, and $21,135 from Macomber School asbestos. Cemetery equipment, with $40,000 coming from cemetery excavator from the 2021 annual town meeting. Hearing no discussion on either of those line items, all those in favor will please say aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 8, see if the town will vote to authorize the town treasurer with the approval of the selectmen to borrow and to issue a note or notes as described in the article sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. May I have a motion, please?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town adopt the provisions of Article 8 as printed in the warrant.
Is there a second?
Second.
Finance Committee recommendation, please?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 8 unanimously.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 9, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer from available funds the sum of $157,879 to operate the Marine Services Enterprise as described in the article, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen and the Director of Marine Services. Mr. Carrero.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town adopt provisions of Article 9 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Finance Committee recommendation, please.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 9 unanimously.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 10, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and/or transfer from available funds the sum of $168,137 to operate the Waterline Enterprise as described in the article, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. May I have a motion, please?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town adopt the provisions of Article 10 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Second? Second. Thank you. Motion and a second. Finance Committee recommendation, please.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 10 unanimously.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 11, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer from available funds the sum of $88,100 to operate the town beaches enterprise as described in the article, sponsored by the Beach Committee and Board of Selectmen. Mr. Carrero.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town adopt provisions of Article 11 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. Finance Committee recommendation?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion on Articles 11 unanimously.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 12, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer from the Cable Television Special Revenue Fund the sum of $155,856 to fund the community television budget for FY22 as described in the article, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Carrero.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town adopt the provisions of Article 12 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Second? Thank you. Finance Committee recommendation?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 12 unanimously.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 13, see if the town will vote to amend the Town of Westport bylaws and regulations relative to revolving funds as described in the article, sponsored by various departments. Mr. Carrero?
Mr. Moderator, I move the town adopt the provisions of Article 13 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? Oh, I'm sorry, Finance Committee recommendation?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 13 unanimously.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 14, to see if the town will vote to reauthorize revolving funds for certain town departments and officers for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2021, as described in the article, sponsored by various departments. Mr. Carrero?
Mr. Moderator, I move the town adopt the provisions of Article 14 as printed in the warrant.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Excuse me just a second. I need to make sure of something here. Finance Committee recommendation, please.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 14 unanimously.
Any discussion? Mr. Legendre.
Yes, in the warrant, there was a typo for the fire department ambulance account. It should be $160,000, not $150,000.
So you would like to amend the line item of the fire department from 150 to 160?
Correct. It's been 160 for the past 3 years.
Okay, so let's get the motion before. So we got a motion to amend the upper limit of the fire department revolving fund to $160,000 from $150, right? Is there a second to that? Second. So any discussion on that motion? So Mr. Legendre, would you like to, you're welcome to address it now.
When I reviewed the warrant, I spoke with the Finance Committee and Chairman, and it was a typo, and it should be 160, which it has been for the past 3 years.
Thank you. So, all those in favor of amending the motion to include $160,000 for fire department, ambulance, et cetera, will please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. So now we move to the motion that was presented by Mr. Carrero, but with, and as you see in the warrant, but with the fire department ambulance equipment, or ambulance expense at $160,000 rather than $150,000. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 15, to see if the town will vote to hear and act on the report of the Community Preservation Committee as described in the article, sponsored by the Community Preservation Committee. Ms. Slade.
I move that the town vote to appropriate a reserve from the Community Preservation Fund's annual revenues and available funds the amounts recommended for the purposes defined in the written recommendations of the Community Preservation Committee, with each item to be considered a separate appropriation.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Finance Committee recommendation, please.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion on Article 15 unanimously.
Thank you. Any discussion? Oh, what? Hang on, I'm sorry. Discussion will proceed as it does with multiple line item articles. So I will once again be reading line items. If you would disagree, vote no, or would like to discuss, please say hold loud enough for me to hear. If you would vote yes, just remain silent. Council on Aging Historic Building Roof, $85,000 with $45,000 from Historic Preservation Reserves and $40,000 from FY22 estimated fund revenues. Historic Gravestones Restoration, $55,000 with $27,000 from Historic Preservation Reserves and $28,000 from FY22 estimated fund revenues. Petersick Conservation Project, $150,000 from undesignated reserves. Community Housing Reserve, $67,000 from FY22 estimated fund revenues. Open Space Reserve, $67,000 from FY22 estimated fund revenues. Administrative expenses, $25,000 from FY22 estimated fund revenues. Budgeted reserves, $400,000 from FY22 estimated fund revenues. So hearing no discussion on any of those line items, all of those in favor of the motion under Article 15 will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 16, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and/or transfer from available funds the sum of $100,000 to be used for the purchase and installation of CAMA software, I'm confident we'll be told what that is, and any incidental and related costs for the conversion of the town's data within the existing CAMA system and/or taking their action relative thereto, sponsored by the Board of Assessors. Mr. Carrero, can you offer some motion?
Mr. Moderator, I move the town adopt the provisions of Article 16 as printed in the warrant with $100,000 from free cash.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Finance Committee recommendation, please.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion on Article 16 unanimously.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 17, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and/or transfer from available funds the sum of $40,000 to be used by the Board of Assessors to fund the fees and expenses necessary to update the revaluation program mandated by Chapter 797 of the Acts of 1979 to place the town on a 100% valuation basis and/or take under action relative thereto, sponsored by the Board of Assessors. Mr. Carrero.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town adopt the provisions of Article 17 as printed in the warrant with $40,000 from free cash.
Second? Finance Committee recommendation, please.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 17 unanimously.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 18, see if the town will vote to accept the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 5, Clause 22G, as described in the article, sponsored by the Board of Assessors. And we'd like to get a motion from the Board of Assessors if we can. But absent that, someone else could make the motion that we see on the screen. Mr. Medeiros? All we need is the words on the screen spoken into a microphone.
Yes, I move that the town meeting adopt the provisions of Article 18 as printed in the warrant.
Thanks. Is there a second? I have a motion and a second. Finance Committee recommendation?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion on Article 18 unanimously.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 19, to see if the town will vote to accept the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 2A, and Chapter 653, Section 40 of the Acts of 1989, to commence with real property taxation classifications for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2021, and/or taking other action relative thereto, sponsored by the Board of Assessors. Mr. Maderas?
Yes, I move the town adopt the provisions of Article 19 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Is there a second? And a motion and a second. Finance Committee recommendation?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 19 unanimously.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 20, to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to petition the Massachusetts General Court for special legislation to change the name of the Board of Selectmen to Select Board as described in the warrant article, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town adopt the provisions of Article 20 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Second? Finance Committee recommendation?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee makes no recommendation on the motion under Article 20 unanimously.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried. Article 21, to see if the town will vote to amend the Town of Westport zoning bylaws relative to marijuana establishments as described in the article. This is sponsored by the Planning Board. Mr. Whiten, will you offer some motion?
Yeah, Mr. Moderator, do you want me to go over the 4 articles together?
No, at this point, we're just looking for a motion, so just
Okay.
those words.
I move the town to adopt the provisions of Article 21 as printed in the warrant.
Thanks. Is there a second? Finance Committee recommendation?
One second. Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee makes no recommendation on the motion on Article 21 unanimously.
Thank you. So, Mr. Whiten, if you'd like to begin discussion, you're welcome to. Well, although before he begins, I'm going to tell you that I'm going to allow a little violation of the rules here because, as many of you may have gathered, the next few articles on the warrant have kind of a complex interrelationship. And so normally we would only address one article at a time, but I think it's really going to serve the meeting to let Mr. Whiten of the Planning Board talk a little bit about how the articles interrelate and what action on each one affects our action on the others. So, Mr. Whiten?
Okay, if you could do the next slide. Okay. I don't know if anybody can read that. There's a handout, and it shows that Article 21, the one that we're starting with here.
Can you speak a little more directly into the microphone?
Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, Article 21 is the general zoning article to really take the location of non-medical and medical marijuana facilities out of the general business districts in town and put them in the STOD, or Science and Technology Overlay District, and the Adult Entertainment Overlay District, both of which are near the western part of Route 6, or on Route 6 in the western part. And it also takes adds some dimensional requirements, setbacks that the current zoning articles do not have. Article 22 is a prohibition article that was asked for by residents to give them a choice here. So Article 22 would prohibit recreational marijuana anywhere in town. If Article 22 passes, then Article 23 was put in the warrant to allow the existing non-medical marijuana facility that has been permitted through the town process to be an exemption to the Article 22. If Article 22 fails, then we would suggest to pass over Article 23. And if Article 22 does pass, Article 24 would allow the requirements in Article 21 on medical marijuana facilities to be changed to comply with Article 21, because Article 22 takes some of those location and setback requirements out. So it's kind of complicated, but Article 23, we now believe we should pass over when we get to it, because the existing holder of the special permit for non-medical marijuana has filed a perimeter A&R plan on their lot, which freezes the zoning to the current zoning. So it would still be allowed, even if it's in my opinion, and I think town council's opinion, that it would still be allowed even if Article 22 passes.
Thank you. Are you finished?
Yep.
What, was there another slide?
Okay, so Article 21 currently permits current zoning permits marijuana establishments in any business district in town, in the adult entertainment and the STOD districts. And Article 21 would remove it from the business districts and just have it in the overlay districts, which are outlined in yellow and blue on this map on the left. I don't know if people can see it, but it says STOD in that area in the blue. And the proposed zoning would limit to them. And the next slide would permit both medical and non-medical in the STOD and the adult entertainment, and would increase the dimensional
Can you speak a little more
requirements.
directly into the microphone?
It would increase the dimensional requirements to 50-foot front yard, 25-foot side yard, in a maximum height of 40 feet, with a residential use setback to a residential dwelling 500 feet.
Next
So,
slide.
The planning board voted 5-0 to support this.
Thank you. Is that it? So, sir, would you like to continue discussion?
Yes, my name is Roger Menard. I'm chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals. I just have a short comment. This article and the following several articles all modify zoning bylaws. However, none of those articles have been reviewed by the Zoning Board of Appeals. Since the Zoning Board of Appeals is responsible for all petitions related to the zoning, the ZBA should have been part of this process, and we were not. That's my own note.
Thank you. Ms. Gee?
Constance Gee. I'm on the Zoning Board of Appeals. I don't speak for the Zoning Board of Appeals, but for myself. I would like to move that we pass over Articles 21 through 24.
Will you speak more directly into...
I would like to move that we pass over Articles 21 through 24 for two reasons. One,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have to tell you that we cannot, that right now we have a motion before us on Article 21.
okay, then I would
So
like...
we can't pass over that one because we've already got an active motion on the floor.
Okay, then I would
It
like
would
to
be possible
speak
for the others.
directly to 21. The current bylaws which govern cannabis-related issues here in town are fine as they are. What we're talking about when we talk about changing this all around and putting it all up on Route 6 is we're talking about one facility, because the other facility is going to open up regardless. And can I say the name of it? Coastal Healing?
It'd be better if you just refer to the existing, the
Okay.
permitted facility.
The
Yeah, thanks.
existed permitted facility. So what's in question here is one other facility. Now, that facility does not have to be contain both grow operations and sell operations. It could just be a small storefront someplace, which might be real, which would be, I think, might be a boon to perhaps, oh my gosh, the Central Village area. I have spoken with and heard from friends that live up near Route 6, and they're concerned with the traffic issues up there, and they also, some of them, are concerned about having everything up in that area. Why wouldn't the town, why wouldn't the rest of the town be involved with the cost and benefits that would come from a possible other storefront? I would like to say that as far as trafficking, if we only had one store in town that sold alcohol, there would probably be a lot of cars in front of that store too. So I think the possibility, keeping the possibility open of having something small, perhaps down in another business district in town, makes a lot of sense and would sort of balance things up for the whole town in general. So I hope that you will join me in voting against Article 21.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan, I believe you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. R. Michael Sullivan, Charing Webb Lane, and I rise strongly in favor of question 21. The whole reason we are revisiting the topic of recreational marijuana is because, believe it or not, the regulations under which we are now operating were not written by your planning board. They're written by the very people they are intended to regulate. Okay, good for them that they were able to get this passed a year and a half ago, but I think it's an affront to the careful and deliberate planning and development process that we have cultivated in this town. The regulation proposed by this question was written by our planning board and limits the location and setbacks, as the previous speaker, one of the previous speakers mentioned. It has no effect on the one store that is under construction or will soon be in operation on Route 6. So I hope you will join me in favor of taking back the regulation to the town, having the planning board be the one to promote this stuff and write it, and vote in favor of question 21. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fernandez?
How you doing? Mike Fernandez, Brothers Way. And this whole zoning issue was made apparent to me because I've lived in Westport my entire life, almost 40 years. And the home that was across the street from me my entire life, it was proposed that this home was going to be knocked down and they were going to put in a large recreational marijuana facility where they were going to grow, distribute. And as I looked deeper into this and started talking with the planning board, it came to light that there were zero restrictions. So if you live on anywhere off a main road, if you live on Cornell Road, you live on parts of Adamsville Road, you live off of Cynthia Lane, you live on 177, even parts of, there's many other areas in the town, there are no restrictions set in place. So if your neighbor was to sell their home, technically they could knock the home down and they could put in a marijuana facility. And there's no restriction on size of the building. You could put a 1 million square foot facility right next door to your house. So like Mr. or the previous speaker was just mentioning, in terms of any regulations, you need to protect the people of this town, the families that moved here. It's one thing to have it in town. It's not this question is not about prohibiting marijuana. This question is about making it safe for all the families that moved here to be able to raise a family and keep the neighborhood safe. This is allowed now in any area. There's only one-way traffic, and there's a lot of concerns on well water. This zoning right here also allows new facilities to be built. Again, 1 million square foot facilities within 900 feet of the brand new school well. We're putting all this money into a new school, and we're going to jeopardize it by having an opportunity of a 1 million square foot facility to come next to a brand new school. So I strongly support this question, and I ask that you guys would vote in favor of adopting these new regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vieira.
Mr. Moderator, so people really understand Article 21. All we're doing here is clarifying what we had as a bylaw, and the Attorney General's told us that we need to have a zoning bylaw. We just can't have a regular bylaw. This is a zoning bylaw. It's going to require 2/3 of the people in this audience to, if they want to have this regulation put in place. I would suggest we should have some zoning on this business, these businesses that are coming in. That's why we have zoning in our community. And as a previous speaker had mentioned, at the time that we did this as a community, there were 500-600 people that were quite concerned because of the neighborhoods that were impacting. And a lot of it was hearsay, but there was a lot of discussion going on of other areas in town. One close to on 177, next to the new school construction. Another down in just past Hayrays on Main Road in that area, as previous speakers have mentioned. And there are other comments of different places in town. It just gives the town an opportunity through a duly elected group, the planning board, to sit down and talk about regulations. It's unfortunate that they didn't talk to the Zoning Board of Appeals, but let's not vote this down just because of that right now. We need to have some kind of zoning. Maybe we come back in and amend zoning in future years, but you just can't leave it wide open, and that's the way it is now, unless we have some kind of zoning on this. This article really is a town-generated regulations done by a town-elected board. We could quiver about whether it should be this or the other, but let's at least get some zoning in. And I thank the planning board for stepping forward and putting this before the voters. Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Stanton Cross?
To me, this is a simple question. When you have the town and the planning board take the effort, listen to the input of all the people in the community, and come up with a common sense zoning plan, versus having it submitted in a zoning plan by the very people that are running that business. There are vested interests. The town doesn't have a vested interest other than to protect us, all of us in this community. You have to start somewhere. And as this evolves, whatever direction it goes in, there'll probably be adjustments that can't be anticipated by anyone. This is all relatively new. But all I can say is when you have town elected people and you have planning boards that have gone over this and poured over it, and that was as a result of this town saying, we didn't want it to happen this way. We want to protect our town. We want to keep our town safe. Common sense zoning is the only way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bullard, I have you as next.
John Bullard, I'm a member of the Planning Board, and we've had many hearings on this topic, all advertised, many articles in the press, dozens and dozens of hours where we've heard from the people of Westport on this subject. And as has been stated, there is one firm under construction, and there is the possibility, because you can have up to 2 non-medical facilities in Westport. So there is the potential that there might be another facility located somewhere in the town. So we know that, and I would point out that the meetings were attended by some members of the zoning board. So they have been involved at least through the attendance of some of their members. And I would just say that having rules through zoning that we have poured over and agonized over and listened to the strongly held and passionately expressed views of the citizens. These are what is expressed in Article 21, and I would urge adoption here today, because until this is adopted, we have something that I think is inferior to what will happen when we restrict the location to the STOD and the Adult Entertainment District. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Sir?
Hi, Patricio Bernal. I just would like to say that if this were to pass, then you would actually be doing damage to the farmers in your own town. Westport likes to tout itself as a right-to-farm community. I remember seeing those signs around town.
Can you speak a little more directly into the microphone?
I remember seeing right-to-farm community as a sign touted by Westport as something that we're proud of. If this were to pass, there's something that people are not telling you about it. It would stop craft cultivation from happening, from being a possibility for people who do not live in this one exact district, which is most of the people in Westport. If there is a farmer that does not live right there and they would like to get into craft cultivation, they will be banned because of this. So if you want to support farmers, maybe consider this not passing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leach?
I'd like to call a question.
Of course you do.
Ms. Gee, I really hate to have to raise my voice at people, but I have to enforce the rules. And so, the question has been called, and the meeting is going to decide whether we want to discuss it any further or not. If we choose to discuss it further, you will be first to speak. So, if you have heard enough discussion of the motion under Article 21, you will vote yes on the motion to call the question. If you would like discussion to continue, you will vote no. All those in favor of calling the question will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
That is carried by a clear 2/3 majority. So we move directly to a vote on the question, motion under Article 21. All those in favor will please raise their hands. Those opposed? That carries by a clear 2/3 majority. Article 22, to see if the town will vote to amend the Town of Westport zoning bylaws relative to marijuana establishments as described in the warrant article, sponsored by the Planning Board. Mr. Whiten?
I move that the town adopt the provisions of Article 22 as printed in the warrant.
Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Finance Committee recommendation, please.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends 6-2 affirmative action on the motion on Article 22.
So, Mr. Whiten, would you like to begin discussion?
Sure. The planning board voted 4-0 not to support this article. 4-1, I'm sorry. This would prevent a future recreational or non-medical marijuana facility from going in anywhere in Westport. And as I said, the planning board voted 4-1 not to adopt this article. This article was put in the warrant at really the request of some of the residents. We wanted to give them the opportunity to have this vote. But subsequently, the existing non-medical marijuana facility that has been under the current zoning has been gone through the legal process of a site plan review and a special permit in the affirmative through the planning board. It would really give them a monopoly on recreational marijuana in the town if you do this. So I would suggest that you vote no on this.
Thank you. I am a little lost on who's next, so I believe it was Mr. Corey. Correct me if I'm wrong. Mr. Corey, please go ahead.
Brian Corey, Drift Road. This article isn't about proper planning. This article isn't about being far-sighted in this matter. It's about fear and control of choice. Right now in Westport, a certain industry generates approximately $10 million in sales per year. One industry. That industry pays no extra taxes to the town of Westport. That industry is the alcohol industry. We currently have 10 liquor licenses out in town. $10 million in inventory. If they were taxed the same way a marijuana establishment were taxed by the Commonwealth, 6% of the gross sales of those alcohol establishments would go to the town of Westport. 6%. Under the current zoning scheme, the current applicant before the town, or the current grantee of a special permit, is going to pay 6% of the gross sales. That can amount over the next 3 to 4 years in a one-year period upon maximum build-out to approximately $1 million in inventory of revenue for the town of Westport. $1 million a year. Between 600 to start, capping out at max growth at approximately $1 million. Those are absolute figures. The fear that's being generated during these hearings is that this is somehow going to cause a moral conundrum for the town of Westport. The people who have proposed this, having attended these hearings, fear that average individuals in town aren't able to make a decision to pass a store they don't want to shop in. These same individuals haven't expressed the fears about living a block away from a package store and seeing people buy alcohol. The arguments that this is some sort of evil within the town or is going to cause problems have not been shown by any empirical evidence within the state. The marijuana industry, according to the New York Times, has generated $1.79 billion in positive income for communities across the United States. So Westport, during these hard financial times, I would say it would be prudent to support or to turn down this article and support reasonable retail sales, just as they have with other communities, other businesses within the community. It strips the choice of the average individual as to where they shop and when they shop and where they go. This also prohibits other industries from coming into town. A couple of years back, a very large company wanted to put a marijuana testing facility in Westport. That facility would have no retail sales, would not be open to the public, and would not have the ability to impact in any negative manner, either through traffic or business congestion or even a neighborhood home. It's a scientific facility. Under this bylaw, a facility that would have an average paying job of over $60,000, employ up to 30 scientific professionals, would not be able to come into Westport. This is short-sighted, it strips the choice of an average person, and it prevents Westport from really taking advantage financially in what we've seen and heard from the Finance Committee from those financial opportunities. It's the most highly regulated business in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It's the most complicated business to apply for in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It's easier in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to get a hazardous waste disposal license and a permitted facility than it is a marijuana facility. Take those into consideration. Marijuana facility that's been permitted, they're good neighbors. They're members of this community. Westport can only have one more, but it can have and open up the Science and Technology Overlay District to testing facilities. Those are needed throughout the state. This article strips that testing facility's ability to locate in this overlay district that the town was so proud to create, I think 5 or 6 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Hi, good afternoon. Michael Sullivan, Drift Road in Westport. I rise opposed to the article that we're discussing, Article 22. Yes, if that's correct.
That's correct.
Thank you. I want to speak a little bit from my background, and then I want to read a letter to the town of Westport from Attorney General Maura Healey, having to do with one of the decisions that she made. My opinion is it's an industry. It's a new industry. Entrepreneurs from Colorado, California have inundated southeastern Massachusetts with investment and quickly yielded a lot of revenues for towns and cities. They've benefited. Now we look at what Westport's done. Keep in mind, in Article 21, we all applauded the planning board for the government authority to take on the goal of setting regulations for this industry. I applaud what they've done. The planning board 3 years ago started out very slowly, methodically, creating an approach that made sense. Let's wait and see what's happening. I remember the terms are almost exactly that. And they did slow down and review and wait for the Cannabis Control Commission to come up with regulations. Okay, so enough of my input. Again, it's an applauding, as many members here in this meeting today have applauded the planning board and what they've done. Okay, let's talk about the fear factor. We've all received the circulars and emails and letters that have gone on and talked about all these times that the town of Westport had said no to marijuana. Okay, under the guidance of this government body, the planning board, we did not say no to marijuana. We said yes to a temporary moratorium so that we could slow down the process, let the Cannabis Control Commission catch up with what the Commonwealth of Massachusetts residents voted on 4 or 5 years ago. Basically, related to that, the Attorney General reviewed our vote back in 2018 for a temporary moratorium, and she said, during the moratorium period, the town shall undertake a planning process to address the potential impacts of a recreational marijuana establishment and related uses, and shall consider adopting new zoning to address the impact and operations of recreational marijuana establishments. That's available through the Attorney General's website. Clearly says we were doing the right thing with a temporary moratorium. Our planning board, the government authority, was going to review it, analyze it, come up with sets of regulations. They spoke on this article. They are opposed to it, if I heard that correctly, and I join them in following the good guidance that the planning board has done for this town and welcoming the first it's certainly major investment for this group that wants to keep going. There's been nothing done at midnight. There's been nothing done without full disclosure in terms of their plan, and I applaud not only the planning board, but this group of entrepreneurs and what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gee, you are next, I believe. Ms. Gee, I have you next.
I hope you will join me with a firm no on this vote. It is a very short-sighted article, attempt to prohibit all marijuana, recreational marijuana, non-medical marijuana in our town, and it, let's just be honest about something. Marijuana is going to continue, has been, and is going to continue to be grown and sold and bought and consumed in Westport, regardless of whether or not we say we're going to put a kibosh on the whole thing. That's the fact. So we can either welcome the good neighbor that is coming in and is going to be opening up the first establishment, and we can reap the benefits as we voted, 3% and another 3% from the state from their proceeds, or we can vote not to have that tax money and let it go to Fall River or to one of the other towns around here. Regardless of this vote, we are going to have one non-medical marijuana facility in this town. So we're only talking about having one more. So I hope that you will face reality, open up your hearts. Please stop moralizing for those of us that would perhaps prefer to have a little cannabis as opposed to having alcohol. And please vote this down. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mike Sullivan, Charing Webb Lane. I rise strongly in favor of question 22. We have voted this way by large majorities 4 times now. Only once at the end of an off-season special town meeting did a very small number of proponents manage to get a vote to the contrary. This will be the 6th time that we have voted on this, either in a general election or at a town meeting. And what we are asking for is a 2/3 vote majority today so we can put at least a temporary end to this discussion. Opponents to this question often point, as we have already heard this evening or this afternoon, to the money that the town will be obtaining through tax revenue. Let me tell you, it's pretty clear from what's happening around the state that the first 3%, which is supposed to offset safety expenditures that the town has, that's going away. Even if it doesn't, it's a wash, okay? The other 3% sales tax, which we just enacted a couple hours ago, that's the next thing on the chopping block. So these revenues are fleeting at best, okay? It has been claimed that one medical marijuana facility, and probably the case, that one medical facility on Route 6 will be unaffected by this vote and likely be permitted to proceed with selling recreational products. This may be true, it probably is true, but we should not be deterred from voting again what we want just because one company has managed to outmaneuver the voters. Now, I'm not on social media, but I get people tell me all the name calling and stuff that's going on. Let me just say that if you're for this motion or if you're against it, doesn't mean anything about whether you're a good person or not, okay? The state has given you the right to make this choice. This isn't something that we made up to be mean to one or two companies. This is a choice that the state has given you, and we've taken it now. This will be the 6th time. So I would encourage you to join me again once more in voting in favor of 22, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Burnell? What's the other person? Thank you. I kind of lost track. Please, ma'am.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer DuPont. I live on Spinnaker Way in Westport, and I strongly also oppose this warrant. I think we all need to take how you feel about marijuana, whether you smoke it, whether you don't smoke it, whether you agree with people smoking, whether you disagree with people smoking, and look at this as a legal business. I may not support the right to have guns. Maybe I don't want a gun, or maybe I don't want to drink alcohol, but that is just as legal as marijuana right now in the state of Massachusetts. So please, when you vote for this or against this, take your personal thoughts about marijuana out of the equation and think about this as a business that is or is not being allowed to operate in town after they've gone through all the proper permits and spent, I don't know how much money, but lots of money to build their business that is now being affected. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Burnell?
I call the question.
Second.
Okay. So I think we know by now what a motion to call the question means. If you have heard enough discussion to allow you to make your decision about the motion under Article 22, you will vote yes to call the question. If you feel like you need more discussion to make that decision, you would vote no. So all those in favor of calling the question will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried. So we now move to a vote on the motion under Article 22. Is everyone clear on what this motion is? Sometimes people get a little confused about yes equals prohibition. I just want to make sure people understand that you are now voting whether you want to or not adopt the provisions of Article 22 as they're printed in the warrant. Okay, with no questions, all those in favor will please raise their hands. Those opposed? That fails to reach the 2/3 majority it needed. Article 23, to see if the town will vote to amend the town of Westport zoning bylaws relative to marijuana establishments as described in the warrant article, sponsored by the planning board. Mr. Whiten?
Mr. Moderator, I move to pass over Article 23.
Thanks. So we have a motion and a second to pass over Article 23, which means that we would take no action under it and move on to the next article. Any discussion of the motion to pass over? Seeing none, all those in favor of passing over Article 23 will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously, and we pass over Article 23. Article 24, see if the town will vote to amend the Town of Westport zoning bylaws relative to marijuana establishments as described in the warrant article sponsored by the Planning Board. Mr. Whiten, we need you back at the mic.
Mr. Moderator, I move to pass over Article 24.
Okay, so again, we have a motion to pass over. Second. Is there any discussion of the motion to pass over? Seeing none, all those in favor of passing over Article 24 will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. We pass over Article 24. Article 25, to see if the town will vote to amend the Town of Westport zoning bylaws as described in the article sponsored by the Planning Board. Mr. Whiten, will you offer some motion, please?
Yes, I move to that the town meeting adopt the provisions of Article 25 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. We have a motion, a second. Finance Committee recommendation, please.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee makes no recommendation on the motion on Article 25 unanimously.
Thank you. Mr. Whiten, would you like to begin discussion?
Sure. This article addresses the comments from the Attorney General's review, and these are really housekeeping things. It amends the definition of medical marijuana treatment center to conform with a new state definition. It amends the section relating to appeals and time for action for special permits to be consistent with the state regulations. The Planning Board recommends approval 5-0.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion of the motion under Article 25? Seeing none, all those in favor will please raise their hands. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 26, to see if the town will vote to amend Town of Westport zoning bylaws as described in the article sponsored by the Planning Board. Mr. Whiten?
Yes, I move the provisions of Article 26. The town adopt the provisions of Article 26 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. Finance Committee recommendation, please.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee makes no recommendation on the motion on Article 26 unanimously.
Mr. Whiten, would you like to discuss?
Sure. This is a big, long article, and really what it is, it's the wording and verbiage that is required by the National Flood Insurance Program for the FEMA floodplains and velocity zones, et cetera. And failure to adopt this could prohibit businesses and homeowners from acquiring flood insurance. This is a state and federal requirement. So the Planning Board recommends approval 5-0. If we amend it or fail it, many homeowners will be unlikely to get flood insurance.
Thank you. Sir?
Hi, Sam Mundell, Drift Road. I had a question through you for the Planning Board. I just wanted to confirm that Article 26 is in fact verbatim with the FEMA regulations that Mr. Whiten referenced, and that there are no other added sections to this clause.
So your question is Article 26 written verbatim with FEMA regulations?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Whiten, can you answer that question for us?
To the best of our knowledge, this was approved by the state FEMA representative.
Okay, so you are uncertain whether it is verbatim FEMA regulations? Mr. Hartnett?
Mr. Moderator, Jim Hartnett. They had a model regulation, which we amended a couple of the sections, just changing wording from one section to the next. This model regulation that they had, like I said, we had some minor amendments. We sent it back up to the state. They looked it over, and they approved it. The amendments were not, they didn't change any substance. They just moved wording from one section to the other.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion of the motion under Article 26? Seeing none, all those in favor will please raise their hands. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 27, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and/or transfer from available funds a sum of $25,000 for the purpose of conducting one or more household hazardous waste collection events for the residents of Westport and for the proper disposal of the hazardous materials and/or taking their action relative thereto, sponsored by the Board of Health and the Fire Department. Ms. Ryden?
Thank you. I move that the town adopt the provisions of Article 27 as printed in the warrant with $25,000 from free cash.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Finance Committee recommendation, please.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion on Article 27 unanimously.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 28, to see if the town will vote to appropriate from the Fund 20 account the sum of $141,620.21 for the purpose of financing the repair, replacement, and/or upgrade of septic systems as described in the warrant under Article 28, sponsored by the Board of Health. Mr. Carrero?
Is the Board of Health making the motion?
Oh, did I ask the Board of Health, can you, anyone who reads this motion will get us in
Yes.
gear here. Mr. Weinberg?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking somebody else to speak. Phil Weinberg, Vice Chair of the Board of Health. I move that the town vote to appropriate the sum of $141,620.21 from the Fund 20 account for the purpose of financing the repair, replacement, and/or upgrade of septic systems with qualified nitrogen-reducing systems pursuant to agreements with the Board of Health and residential property owners, including without limitation all costs thereof as defined in Section 1 of Chapter 29C of the General Laws, at an interest rate to be established by the town treasurer, and in a manner consistent with state law, provided that said appropriation will be expended from revenues and funds accumulated from the repayment of residential septic repair loans previously dispersed by the Board of Health in accordance with the terms of a grant to the town pursuant to Chapter 85 of the Acts of 1994.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Motion is second. Finance Committee recommendation, please. Yes, sir? Right. And so, I'm sorry, thank you very much for pointing that out. There are situations in which what you see, we do our best to give you an accurate motion in the warrant of what's going to be presented. But sometimes circumstances change, and so this is a different answer proposed. The warrant article proposed a question. This is a slightly different answer than what you see in the warrant. And I appreciate you pointing that out, but it's perfectly okay for them to propose a slightly different answer than what's printed there. Beg your pardon? I'm sorry that I can't hear you. Right. Well, and what is on the screen is the motion that is before us now. So this is what we are deciding, not the one that you see in front of you in the warrant. And thank you for pointing that out, that there's a small difference between what you see in the warrant and what's on the screen. This is what we're discussing right here. So, where were we? We got a Finance Committee recommendation? Did we? I don't recall.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 28 unanimously.
Any discussion? Ma'am?
Sue Brayton. I'd like to make a motion to amend the article in the first line where it says the sum of $141,620.21 from the Fund 20 account to read the balance of the Fund 20 account. That figure is an exact figure as of a specific date. The figure's always changing due to interest, et cetera. So if it has the balance, then we can use the full balance of the account.
So you are proposing to amend this motion to read in the beginning. I move the town vote to appropriate the balance of the Fund 20 account?
Correct.
Okay, so is there a second to the motion to amend? Second. Motion and a second. So now we're discussing that amendment. Any discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amending the motion under Article 28 as described, will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. So now we move to the motion under Article 28 with the amendment so that it reads the balance of rather than the sum of $141,000. So any further discussion on the main motion under Article 28? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 29, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer from available funds the sum of $500,000 for the purposes of financing water pollution facility projects and to repair, replace, and or upgrade septic systems as described in the article. Mr. Carrero.
Offer the motion.
Pardon?
Offer the motion. You want me to offer the motion? You want me to offer the motion? You want me to offer the motion?
Yes, please.
Okay. I don't know. Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to appropriate the sum of $500,000 for the purpose of financing water pollution facility construction and improvement projects and to repair, replace, and or upgrade septic systems pursuant to agreements between the Board of Health and the residential property owners. Said amount to be expended under the direction of Town Administrator, Board of Health, and to meet this appropriation to authorize the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, to borrow said amount from the Massachusetts Water Pollution Abatement Trust, otherwise under and pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7, subsection 1, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, providing that any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the costs of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved hereunder, accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 20 of the General Laws, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount, and that the Board of Selectmen or other appropriate town officer is authorized to take any other action necessary to carry out the vote taken hereunder.
Thank you. Is there a second? May I have the Finance Committee recommendation, please?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 29 unanimously.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried by a clear two-thirds majority. Article 30, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and/or authorize the borrowing of funds for the engineering services for the purposes of funding the design of a sewer and water line or lines in North Westport, including all costs for the design of other related structures and any costs incidental and related thereto, or taking the action related thereto, sponsored by the Planning Board. Mr. Carrero, will you offer some motion?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to appropriation of sum of $350,000 for the purposes of funding the design of a sewer water line and all lines in North Westport, including all costs of the design of other related structures and any costs incidental and related thereto. Said amount to be expended under the direction of the town administrator, and to meet this appropriation to authorize the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, to borrow said amount pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7, subsection 1, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, provided that any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premiums applied to the payment of such costs of issuance or such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved hereunder, according with Mass General Law, Chapter 34, Section 20 of the General Laws, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed, to pay such costs by a like amount, and that the Board of Selectmen or other appropriate town officer is authorized to take any other action necessary to carry out the vote taken hereunder.
Second.
Well done. Second, and Finance Committee recommendation, please?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 30 unanimously.
Is there any discussion? Sir?
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
I am Bob Daler, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Planning Board. I recommend that the town meeting vote appropriately for approval of this article. This is the first step in a long-planned project to bring sewer and water into the town, and particularly the Route 6 corridor, which is the heart of our economic development area. So this puts in place the spine and the first step in a longer program. So I urge the town meeting to vote yes on this article.
Thank you. Any further discussion of the motion under Article 30? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 31, to see if the town will vote to transfer the care, maintenance, and operation of the Westport Senior/Junior High School located at 19 Main Road in Westport from the school committee to the Board of Selectmen, and further, that the Westport Board of Selectmen be authorized to transfer ownership of said property on such terms as they deem appropriate within law and or taking other action relative thereto, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Shufelt?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town adopt the provisions of Article 31 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Motion and a second. May I have the Finance Committee recommendation, please?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends 5-2 affirmative action on the motion under Article 31.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 32, to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to transfer the care, maintenance, and operation of the new grade 5 to 12 school located at 200 Old County Road in Westport from the Board of Selectmen to the school committee and/or taken their action relative thereto, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. Ms. Shufelt?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town adopt the provisions of Article 32 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Second? Second. Good. Finance Committee recommendation, please?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 32 unanimously.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Point of order, I believe the address is 380-400 Old County Road. If someone could clarify, please.
That is correct.
So, so would you be kind enough to offer us an amendment to the address so that we're transferring the right building here?
I move to amend the article to state the grade 5 through 12 school located at 380-400 Old County Road.
380 to 400. So, do we have a second for the motion to amend? Any discussion on the motion to amend? Seeing none of those in favor of the amendment will please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. So now we return to the original motion, but with the number 200 replaced by 380 to 400. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 33 is to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to transfer the care, maintenance, and operation of the Westport Camping Ground property, so-called located at 346 Old County Road in Westport, from the Board of Selectmen to the Westport School Committee, and are taking their action relative thereto, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. Ms. Shufelt?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town adopt the provisions of Article 33 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Finance Committee recommendation?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends no affirmative action on the motion under Article 33 unanimously.
Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Moderator.
Yes, Ms. Shufelt.
So the Board of Selectmen did put this article on the warrant, but when we recently gathered more information and made our recommendation, we, on a vote of 3-2, voted not to recommend this article. So the article only authorizes the transfer of the property. It doesn't require the transfer of the property. So if it passes, it's, we can still take action one way or the other. But so a yes vote would still allow that to happen, but a no vote would mean we could not.
Okay. Ms. Stanton-Cross?
Thank you. On behalf of the school committee, I know that we had some discussions concerning the cost that was involved with the campground and what expenses it had with us running on the budget. However, because the actual article, it allows the select board the authority to transfer and doesn't say it has to happen forthwith, we are in support of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. So any further discussion on the motion under Article 33? Mr. Vieira?
Mr. Moderator, I rise in support of this article. What we're trying to do here is give the school committee some authority to come up with some planning. The selectmen still have to review it. They'll still be able to deal with it down the road. But right now, it's in no man's land where the school building committee, which I'm a part of, has a limited to the school building that we're dealing with and that property, not the campground. So right now, we need to figure out what we're going to do with that. And that's the first step to go in that project. It's not an automatic empty check, and the selectmen certainly have control of what we do with it in the future, but at least get it moving down the road. Otherwise, we're going to be back here 3 or 4 years from now still talking about what are we going to do with the rest of that land and how it impacts the cost of the schools and their operation. Thank you.
Any further discussion of the motion under Article 33? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Oh, I'm sorry. I failed to recognize someone who wanted to speak. Please.
Julia Krapf, Hillside Road.
You speak a little more directly into the microphone? Up on your toes.
Julia Krapf, 10 Hillside Road. I would like to know why a piece of land that's been acquired outside of the school planning process should be given to the school committee just because they might be able to figure out a use for it.
Now, that's a question that I really can't pass on to someone else because it's looking for, an opinion as opposed to a fact.
So is there unidentified use for this property?
So you would like to ask just the yes or no question, is there an identified use for this property? And you'd like to ask that of the school committee, or?
I suppose I'm officially asking it of you, but
Well, one of the great things about my job is I don't participate in the discussion. So I'm going to be happy to pass that question on if you just tell me who you'd like to ask.
then I'll ask the school building committee.
School Building Committee, Mr. Vieira, is there an identified,
I think the chair is here, of the school
I
building
think
committee.
she
She might
left.
more appropriately answer.
The vice chair is here, though.
Vice chair? I can answer if you like.
okay,
Vice
yeah,
chair, wanna
well,
do that?
it sounds like a yes or no question. Is there a,
There's a plan for the town, and it includes the school. There's a need for the school for
well,
adequate...
can I ask you, going back to that thing about not editorializing good questions, she's asking, is there a plan for the use of the campground?
Yes, there's multiple plans, actually.
Great, thanks. Anything further?
Mr. Moderator.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I suppose I would ask whether the multiple uses are all by the school or by the town itself.
Oh, so you're asking if the multiple uses are school-related or town-related? Okay, is there anyone who can answer that one for us? Both.
I could try.
Ms. Schufelt?
So the most commonly talked about proposal is for fields, but no decision has been made. There is no active project underway, and there is no identified project at this time.
Thank you.
The fields, even fields, there's some conversation about whether that would be limited to
I'm
the
going to
school
ask you not to
program
do the
or-
editorializing too, so there are, did you get a satisfactory answer to your question? Good. Anything further? Thanks. And there was someone up here, Ms. Rouse?
Yes, just to reiterate also that the Finance Committee has not been presented with any options for what the property uses potentially could be, nor any of the costs associated with any of those properties. So that is why we were voted not in favor of this at this time. Those discussions have not happened yet with the Finance Committee.
Thank you. Any further discussion of the motion under Article 33? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Okay, may I see hands of those in favor, please? And hands of those opposed?
Oh, no.
Hands of those in favor again, please. I think finally we're few enough that I can count them. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 2, 3, 4, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 52, 53. Okay, that's 53 yeas. The nays, please. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38. That is carried, 53 to 42. Article 34, to see if the town will vote to transfer a sum or sums of money to the stabilization fund as recommended by the Finance Committee and or taken into action relative thereto, sponsored by the Finance Committee. Mr. Carrero?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town transfer $50,000 to the stabilization fund for free cash.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Finance Committee recommendation, please.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 42 unanimously.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 35, see if town will vote to amend the Westport personnel bylaws as follows, or take no action relative thereto, sponsored by the Planning Board, Board of Selectmen.
I move that the town pass over Article 35.
Any discussion of the motion to pass over? We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion of the motion to pass over? Seeing none, all those in favor of passing over Article 35 will please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 36, to see if the town will vote to accept the layout as a public way of Joanne's Way as described in the warrant under Article 36, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. Ms. Shufelt?
I move that the town adopt the provisions of Article 36 as printed in the warrant.
Is there a second? Finance Committee recommendation?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion on the Article 36 unanimously.
Thank you. Any discussion? Mr. Whiten?
Yeah, the planning board at a regular meeting on February 9th considered the acceptance of plan for Joanne's Way. The board determined that this road was constructed in compliance with the town's subdivision regulations. The planning board recommends acceptance of Joanne's Way as shown on the plan entitled Street Acceptance Plan Joanne's Way dated June 3, 2020.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 37, see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to acquire by donation from the Charles F. Barboza Trust the fees simple and land listed in the warrant under Article 37, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. Ms. Shufelt?
I move that the town adopt the provisions of Article 37 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Finance Committee recommendation, please?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion on Article 37 unanimously.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. We have only one article left, but before we do that, I want to thank all of you for sticking around. I'm going to ask you to join me in giving a hand to the Westport maintenance and technical people here who do such a great job to make this possible. Thank you very, very much. They are consummate pros. Article 38, to see if the town will vote to raise, borrow, and/or appropriate $211,000 for the acquisition by gift, negotiated purchase, or eminent domain of a conservation restriction over a parcel of land as described in the warrant under Article 38, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. So, Ms. Shufelt, will you read this whopper?
This was under Gary's. I move that the town vote to appropriate the sum of $211,000 for the negotiated purchase of a conservation restriction over a parcel of land of approximately 25.65 acres owned by Carrick Corp Industries Limited, being the sole trustee of the 190 CW Trust, January 30, 1997, and shown as Lot 118A on a plan entitled Approval Not Required Plan of Land in Westport, Massachusetts, prepared for Carrick Corp Industries Limited, trustee of 190 CW Trust, made by Boucher and Associates, dated August 27, 2020, and recorded in Plan Book 181 at page 60 in the Bristol County Southern District Registry of Deeds, to be held by the Conservation Commission in the town of Westport in accordance with the Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40, Section 8C, and as it may hereafter be amended by other Massachusetts statutes relating to the conservation and passive recreation purposes, and to meet said appropriation to authorize the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, to issue any bonds or notes that may be necessary for that purpose as authorized by the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, or any other enabling authority, provided that any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the cost of issuance of bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved hereunder in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 20 of the General Laws, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount, and that the Board of Selectmen be authorized to file on behalf of the town of Westport any and all applications deemed necessary for grants and/or reimbursements from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts deemed necessary under the Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund Act, PI 88 568 78 Stat 897, and/or any other applications for funds in any way connected with the scope of this article, and the Board of Selectmen and the Conservation Commission be authorized as they deem appropriate to enter into all agreements and execute any and all instruments as may be necessary on behalf of the town of Westport to effect said purchase, provided, however, that no portion of said appropriation shall be expended unless the town is eligible for a grant reimbursement from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in an amount of not less than $105,500.
Could you repeat that? Second.
I think there's another line to that, that goes, and the town has received gifts of funds sufficient to make up for the full
Oh, I didn't
purchase
see
price?
that one. Yes. And the town has received gifts funds sufficient to make up the full purchase price.
Thank you. Is there a second? Whoever wrote that was clearly not in class when they discussed run-on sentences.
And my little paper says that the finance committee chair was supposed to read that.
So, Finance Committee recommendation, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on the motion under Article 38 unanimously.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Sir?
Jeff Bull, Horseneck Road. Given that we are acquiring this property, through you, Mr. Moderator, can someone tell us where is this besides the article references?
Oops, not that. Oops.
I believe Mr. Decker could answer that.
Yeah, we have a guest who, with consensus from the meeting, I'm allowed to speak to us. If anybody objects to the yes speaking, we'll take a vote on it, but hearing no objection, I'm going to ask him to explain that to us. That microphone's fine. Yep, thanks.
Through you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Alan Decker with the Buzzards Bay Coalition. The map on the handout, so this property fronts on Meadowbrook Lane. Meadowbrook Lane runs south from Charlotte White Road. This property is in the northern reaches, if you will, of the Angeline Brook watershed. Does that help?
And someone just gave me the map. I apologize. I didn't see it.
It's quite all right.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Bullard?
That's it.
Okay, any further discussion of the motion under Article 38? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. May I have a motion to dissolve Westport Annual Town Meeting? Second, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of dissolving, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried. We are dissolved. Thank you and good afternoon.